Welcome. We're going to call the meeting to order. Bridgewater Township Zoning Board of Adjustment regular meeting, Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. Both adequate electronic notice of this meeting specifying the time, place, and manner in which such notice was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6, specifically on April 19th, 2023. Proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger on file with the clerk at the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the bulletin board at the municipal building. Please be aware of the Zoning Board of Adjustment policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30, and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. If you're able, please rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Joanne. Good to have you here. Thanks for filling in. If we can get a roll call, please. Here.
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 Here. Here.
Here. Yes, good. Mr. Wadley?
I'd just like to make a quick comment before we go to the next session. Joanne who just took roll call, is filling in for Roger. And on behalf of myself, and I hope for the rest of the board, thank you for everything you've done to get us current on everything. You've done an absolute terrific job, and thank you.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to open up the meeting to any member of the public that would like to speak on a land use matter that is not on our agenda this evening. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close that portion and move on to number 6, approval of board minutes. We have our October 10th, 2023 regular meeting. Looking for comments, changes, please. Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
I move.
There's Mr. Widley.
Second.
That was Mr. Bongiorno on a second. Joanne, can we call it?
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, next up we have resolutions. Let's do the NASCAR first. Comments, changes? Seeing none, could I have a motion, please?
I move.
Mr. Widley, Mr. Bongiorno, second.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, next up we're going to do Kogan. Comments, changes? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
I move.
Mr. Widley,
Second.
Mr. Bongiorno.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, and we're going to move on to applications, and we're going to do some house cleaning on application 20-008. That's the Shaw application. And Rich, could you take us through that, please?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, apparently this applicant was seeking to withdraw their application and come in with an entirely new application. And as we've discussed in the past, that requires the board to agree to permit the withdrawal. And again, in this case, I would recommend it.
All right, so we'd be seeking, based on Mr. Aller's recommendations, a motion to approve the withdrawal? Yes.
I move.
All right, Mr. Wiley.
Second.
That was seconded by Mr. Bongiorno. Again, this is a motion to approve the withdrawal. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Rich, does that mean they're going to come with a whole new,
They'll come in with a new application and just start over.
from square one?
Correct.
So whatever happened before is all
Correct.
by now? Okay.
All right, next up, we have Chimney Rock Self-Storage. That's 1661 Route 22. Hi there.
right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Steve Malenik. I'm an attorney from the law firm of Greenbaum, Rowe, Smith, and Davis. I'm here for the applicant on this application, Chimney Rock Self-Storage. Before we get into the application itself, I do understand with correspondence that received early this afternoon, or maybe late this afternoon, of a notice of appearance from an attorney representing an objector, having spoken with Mr.
Just time out.
Yes.
Let's do notice, let's do
Oh, all right. Yeah, absolutely.
house cleaning with Mr. Aller, and then we can move on to
Thank you, Mr.
these
Chairman.
other issues. Thanks.
Yep, so, Mr. Chairman, with respect to notice in the board's jurisdiction, I've reviewed the notice from the applicant. Their certified mails were sent on November 2nd and published also on November 2nd. Found the notice to be in proper form and sufficiently detailed to alert the public of the application, and so the board does have jurisdiction.
Great. And just for members of the public, just for your own information, this is broadcast on YouTube, so I expect this will go more than one night. So if you're unable to attend in person, you by all means can watch it on YouTube. You type in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and you go to our channel, and the videos will be there. And with that, Mr. Melnick, am I saying that right?
Malenik, Mr. Fuchs, yes. Yes.
All right, it's very nice to meet you, and please continue. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
Not a problem at all. So as I was saying, we did receive notice of an appearance by an attorney this afternoon representing an objector, a competitor to the applicant. Speaking with Mr. Oler, we agreed that from a housekeeping perspective, it's best to address this issue up front, which is what we'd like to do now. The applicant is challenging the standing of that objector herein. The objector is not located in Bridgewater. In fact, they're close to 4 miles away in a different municipality on the other side of Route 22. There's virtually nothing in the notice of appearance that was provided that indicates any impact to their property other than a competitive impact, which our courts have been clear is not sufficient to warrant standing. In fact, there's a number of cases on this particular subject. So before we get too deep into the application, we would like to address the standing of the applicant, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to punt right to Mr. Aller and let you guys work it out.
So I will ask Ms. Westlake to come forward, please. I know she's here. Just make your appearance, please.
Certainly. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosalind Westlake. I am here on behalf of Arthur's Self-Storage, Inc., and we do contend that we have standing to object to this particular application. Yes, of course, we are a competitor, but we are not here in the shoes of a competitor per se. We are here because it is our position that the proposed plan is so excessive in its overdevelopment as to basically create a totally unfair advantage to this applicant and the property owner with respect to the relative to any other property owner along the corridor in Route 22 in the area, and that would include neighboring municipalities, because it's such excessive overdevelopment, we believe that is above and beyond any competitive issue, and it would in fact interfere with our ability to properly engage in business in any other location nearby.
So, yep, so, I'm sorry.
I was just going to respond to that, Mr. Oler. The cases on this issue are clear that the standing issue goes to issues other than how they affect the competitive nature of the businesses. They look to whether or not there is a disadvantage to the use and operation of that property outside of business considerations. This is a site that's, as I said, close to 4 miles down the road. It's on the other side of Route 22. It's in a different municipality. They're not a taxpayer. This is a business, what you just heard from Ms. Westlake, is they're concerned about the size and how that is going to be, in her words, an unfair advantage to their business. That is competitive, and that is what the courts say is not a consideration. If you look at the case of Car Spa, that was a competitor that was 2 miles away in a different municipality. And the courts there were clear that that is not standing. There was no direct relationship from planning or zoning perspective to allow that competitor to participate in the hearings. If you look at the Hartz Mountain case, courts are clear that they should not burden municipal boards with competitive challenges. That's what the courts are for later on, but that also speaks against our system of free enterprise. And to allow competitors in when there's no planning or zoning perspective that they can bring other than not wanting a competitor to participate or to get their approvals is counter to the municipal land use law. So that's our position.
Yeah, and you know, we did get this rather late today, and I looked at a couple of cases. I did speak to Mr. Melanik about it as well. And my determination in looking at the cases that you've just cited and others, that, you know, the distance from the property or whether or not they're in the municipality isn't the determining factor. And I do think that in this case, we should err on the side of caution and allow people to state their objection to this board. I mean, what is she going to do? They're going to give us information about the property that the board's going to consider or not. And I would instruct the board, when you hear that testimony and information, to make a determination in your own minds if it's only because you know, Arthur's Storage feels that they're going to have business taken away from them. You know, I think that it would impact the weight of any of that evidence. But at the same time, I think we should hear it and let the board make that decision.
So based on Mr. Aller's recommendation, you know, I'm just speaking personally here. I've been an objector in a case. My front yard is in Warren, my backyard is in Martinsville, and I participated many times in the land use activities of Warren Township. So I don't think being a taxpayer or residing inside a municipality qualifies or disqualifies a participant. And I definitely want to err, because I never want to tell somebody in a land use situation that you can't participate. Now, with that said, I do agree with Mr. Aller in the fact that, you know, this is a competitor, and that should be kind of an asterisk to maybe some of the testimony that we're going to hear. So, you know, I'm inclined to, you know, let you participate, and, you know, it was a little bit late in the day for us really to have this issue briefed and probably properly vetted, but, you know, Mr. Melnick, I think, raises some very good points, and I think Mr. Aller, what he's put on the record is very important to the board. We recognize you as an objector to a competitor.
Yes. No, I greatly appreciate that, and I firmly believe that when you hear the testimony to be presented by my client's engineer and planner, that you will see this has nothing to do with competition.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are here today for a preliminary and major site plan with D and bulk variance relief being sought for the property located at lot 800, or block 800, lot 9, which is 1662 Route 22. That's on the north side of Route 22, close to Vossler Avenue. The property is currently improved by an underutilized and mostly obsolete office building. The applicant is seeking the approvals to construct and operate a self-storage facility by a national self-storage operator known as Snapbox. It includes D1 use variance relief, as self-storage is not permitted in the C5 zone, as well as D4 relief for FAR and as well as C variances. Through the testimony that's going to be provided tonight, you'll see that we do believe we've met the proofs necessary to obtain the relief sought, that this is a use that is going to be beneficial to the Township of Bridgewater. It's in a good location. It's a use that is growing, and it's going to be a better use than what's currently situated there or that is authorized by your use code. We have received the engineering, planning, fire official, and director of sewer utilities reports and plan to address them throughout the testimony. We plan on bringing 4 witnesses. First witness will be Matt Lang, who's the COO of Snapbox, who will testify as to the proposed operations of the facility. Paul Winters is our project civil engineer, who will testify on the civil. Robert Nacella is the project's architect. And then finally, Paul Rickey, who will be the project's planning expert. So with that, we can introduce our first witness and get him sworn in. Yes.
I have one issue I want to bring up, and you know, I certainly would never tell you how to present your case.
Sure.
The order is all yours, and I'm not asking for anything that I don't think is completely in my jurisdiction. But you know, my only job really is to make sure that the board's time is used efficiently and that we have a fair hearing and everyone gets to speak. I'm concerned that the fire marshal, in what he's written, it's only a 1-paragraph letter, but I think in some way this is a gorilla in the room that I think you need to address. And you know, I thought it was so important. I drove to 2 other storage facilities nearby, to see if there was circulation and where, there was space that a truck could turn around, a fire truck. So maybe you want to talk about this, because if there's a situation, and maybe we could have our planner and our engineer chime in on this as well, but when you have the township fire marshal having these types of concerns, I think potentially it could change your whole plan and potentially change your testimony. So this is something maybe I'd like to hit first off.
That's not a problem, Mr. Chairman. We
open
do,
to it.
yeah, I am open to it, because I think if that's something that the board considers a big issue, and clearly it is, we should address it head on. What we can do is we can have our civil engineer come on to address that issue, because he did speak with the fire marshal about this issue and address that letter.
Right, and just logistically, just so you know, and so you know where I stand and so members of the public know, safety is paramount. Safety is first. Fire comes first. And then obviously drainage issues, water issues. I don't think that if we can't satisfy those basic logistical issues, we can't really move on to the nuts and bolts of the case. So I appreciate you doing this, and
Well, why don't we-
let's talk about it.
Why don't we just address this head on?
Steve, do you have all your witnesses here tonight?
I do. You want to swear them in all at once?
All in? Yeah, let's do that.
Let's have all our witnesses come up, and we'll get sworn in all at once.
We may re-swear them as we go to a different night or whatever, but let's start this way. Okay. Hi, everybody. Would you all raise your right hands, and board professionals as well, please raise your right hands. I'll swear everyone. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And just my left to right, just for the record, please, state your names. Okay, and the board professionals that we just swore, for the record? Thank you. Okay,
Thanks, guys.
thanks.
So Scarlett, maybe you could help me out here and put it more eloquently than I probably stated it, about where our fire marshal is and what we're looking to do.
The fire marshal wrote the letter. For those that haven't read the letter, the fire marshal required a circulation pattern around the entire region. With, from a planning perspective, I have no comment because the safety issues with the fire marshal. However, I will say that this is typical of his reports. This is nothing unique to this application.
Now, have we had other cases recently where we've had an application that didn't meet what the fire marshal has asked for, and we've had subsequent revisions recently?
Working on memory, which can of course be flawed.
Yeah.
Bridgewater Association, not close to it, they had to redesign. The next one was, is another self-storage, I'm used to the names, I was 22, very close to this one. Also did not, conform its next, I wish I had, can you help me with the name?
Signature?
Signature.
Yeah.
Signature was a large storage warehouse facility, and that one did not conform to his requirements, and they had to redesign.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think actually, we'll get the witness qualified here, but actually, we think we can comply with what the fire marshal was asking for. Mr. Winters, just to get you sworn in, can you give the board the benefit of your education and your qualifications?
Yes, I would be happy to. If you can't hear me for any reason, let me know and I'll speak up, of course. Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My license is in good standing. I have over 20 years of experience in consulting engineering. I've previously been qualified to offer professional testimony in several other municipalities, including Bound Brook, Princeton, Hanover Township, Parsippany Troy Hills, and several others.
And your license is current?
Yes, my license is current and in good standing. Thank you.
Thank you. This board accepts you as a professional engineer.
Thank you. So I actually did have a chance to speak with Chief Scalera this morning. He made some time so we could talk about the application and his letter. His primary concern had to do with access to the rear of the building. I clarified that we are providing an access lane, and we discussed the need. He brought up in particular to have a 22-foot wide access lane. We include an 18-foot, and when I give full testimony, I have an exhibit, and I could point out where this is for the board's benefit. But we identified that he does want to see a 22-foot lane directly behind the building. That's wider than what we have, but we reviewed the plan and determined we can accommodate that. That was his primary concern, to make sure he has access, and we talked about alternatives from Donahue as well, but he is content with us being able to meet that with the wider lane at the rear.
Mr. Chairman, any approval today, we would agree to a condition of approval to widen the lane.
Can we get a new letter that states all those things that you just stated from our fire marshal, that you guys have spoke and that he's in agreement and he's satisfied?
We can certainly make a request. Obviously, it's the municipal's fire marshal, but we can certainly ask him to do that.
Well, this is all I know right now is what this letter is. So it's dated October 23rd, 2023. So you say you spoke, but I really have no way to validate that. So do you want to provide another letter? Do you want to ask the fire marshal to provide another letter?
Certainly, if we don't conclude tonight, obviously, we have to make that request, but the condition of approval would be to the fire marshal's satisfaction of our plans.
We okay with that?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So you've already been qualified, Mr. Winters.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to go get your...
Yes, because I would like to start with the description of the existing site conditions, and I have a few exhibits. Is there a preferred location for the exhibits?
Could you speak into the mic, please?
Sorry, thank you. Is there a preferred location for the exhibits for this part?
There's an easel there. I just want as many people to see as possible. You know, you can also plug in a laptop. If you have an HDMI cord, we can get a broadcast out to the audience. I just want to make sure everyone can see and they're able to participate.
I have some of them digitally already, if
Okay.
there's only each one.
So Steve, what she was saying is if you let her know which exhibit you're putting up, she can put it on the screen.
Great.
Those are 10 times.
You just look on the screen and tell me which one.
We have screens up here too. You don't need to do
Yeah.
that for us. You can even
Yeah.
face that out if you like.
I figured I'd set it up within arm's reach, so that's quite all right.
So Paul, before you describe the description of the property, you put on the easel an exhibit, and on the screen this is an exhibit. If you can describe that.
Yes.
Mark it as exhibit A1.
Yes, certainly. This is an exhibit that is depicting existing aerial photography of the property in question that we're here to discuss tonight. This is Lot 9 in Block 800, outlined in red. This will be exhibit, we need a number for this, A1, thank you. So A1.
Would you mark that board A1, please? Thank you. And today's date also?
All right, so our subject property is located along the north side of Route 22, which is the divided highway under state of New Jersey jurisdiction. Our property here falls within the C5 commercial and nursing home zone. The total area of the property is approximately 3.44 acres. As you can see, the site is triangular in shape. The deepest part of the lot is on the western side, and it becomes less depth until we reach the extreme eastern end, where we come to a point, which is actually where Donahue Road connects to Route 22. As noted, we have frontage on two roads, Route 22 to our south, and Donahue Road backs up to the north. Thank you. Excuse me. The site is presently developed with a two-story office building situated on the western side of the lot, along with surface parking lots and related site improvements. The eastern side of the lot contains an existing stormwater management basin, and surrounding area consists primarily of residential development, and adjacent uses include, to our south, we have single-family homes, which are along Glen Road across Route 22. Those are at the bottom of this. North is up on this map. Care One at Somerset Valley Assisted Living Facility is located directly to our west on the left side. There are additional single-family homes across Donahue Road to the north of the property, and just immediately to our east, just off this map, which you don't see, is a real estate agent office along Route 22. The property slopes from the rear of the site along Donahue Avenue, Donahue, yes.
Excuse me, you can move that microphone so it's easier for you to speak into it and for us to hear you.
Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I have the volume for it.
I understand.
The property slopes from the rear of the site from Donahue Road towards Route 22, and there's some significant difference on the west side where we have the greatest change. We're approximately 27 feet in grade change from Donahue to Route 22. As the site does contain existing slopes of greater than 10% on a portion, provisions of the Township's Hillside Development Ordinance will apply to this development and this property. There's two existing driveways from the site, both from Route 22. There's an ingress driveway on the east side of the site, entrance only, and then there's a divided but two-way driveway on the west side which provides ingress and egress. There are no driveways directly to Donahue Road from this property. Property is presently served by public utilities for water, gas, sewer, electric, and telecommunication services. There's also an existing sanitary sewer main easement that runs along our entire frontage and then moves in a northwest direction very near the eastern terminus of the property. The site is not encumbered by any areas regulated by the DEP land use regulations such as wetlands or flood hazard areas. These areas are not found on or near our subject site. So that's a brief overview of our existing conditions. Moving on, I'd like to discuss the proposed conditions, and I have a second exhibit for that, and I'll need assistance to get that on the digital board, but while that's happening, I'll turn that over and we'll mark that in as Exhibit A2.
Marking it as Exhibit A2, if you can, for the record and transcript, identify what it is and the date.
That's correct, thank you. So this exhibit is titled Site Plan Rendering for Chimney Rock Self-Storage. This is a aerial image, the same one that we had taken and shown you in the existing plan before this, in Exhibit A1, upon which we have placed our proposed site improvements and landscaping improvements, and then to match the mapping, we've colored them in, so you can see how this would look in the proposed condition.
And the exhibit bears a date?
Yes, it does. The exhibit date is November 8th, 2023. So, our application proposes to construct a self-storage facility, which includes a new 3-story building consisting of 2 floors above a cellar level and totaling 129,897 square feet. Storage units will vary in size, and a total of 876 units are proposed. Along with this are other site improvements, including a parking lot, which will be on the east side of this building, as you can see. That'll contain 19 parking spaces in total. Although the municipal ordinance does not have a provision for the parking requirement for self-storage facilities that we identified, we relied upon the Institute of Transportation Engineers' current edition to determine what parking quantity would be suitable for these uses. So we calculated 19 spaces is consistent with that, and we feel that's appropriate to serve both customers and employees for self-storage facilities of this size. We propose a standard 9 by 18 dimension parking space, which I do want to note is a small size reduction from the township design standard of 9.5 foot width, but we feel this is appropriate to serve the intended use. There's also additional spaces, or rather there's spaces provided immediately at the front of the building that provide some additional room, striped loading zones to the right and left to accommodate customers who may wish to have more flexibility, more room to take items in and out of their vehicles as they may see fit for storage. Also at the front of the building, we will be providing the required accessible parking space. That's on the right end of the parking row in front of the building. And although not shown on this plan, and as consistent with comments we've received on the application and the current legislation from the state of New Jersey, we'll be providing one make-ready parking space for electric vehicle charging. That, I believe, will be in proximity to the accessible parking space on that side of the
That be
parking.
20 or 19, including the EV?
That will, according with the state's legislation, that will actually allow us to say we could count as 20, since they allow us to count those as 2 spaces.
Thank you.
So thank you, that's correct. Access to the site will continue to be provided from Route 22 using the existing driveway openings serving the site presently. No new driveways are proposed, and no access will be provided via Donahue Road, so we'll continue to access the site in a similar manner. Vehicles entering the site from the easterly ingress will proceed into the property, and they will have an opportunity either for passenger vehicles to turn immediately into the first parking lot entrance on the right side. They can also proceed past that and go towards the front of the storage facility at the main entrance, which is on the eastern face of the building. And there is room for them to circulate around from that. Larger vehicles, box trucks, if people want to use those for storage of larger items, can proceed straight through and towards the left of that parking area and continue onward to the west side of the site, where there's also additional loading spaces, which I'll talk about in a moment. We did evaluate driveways and aisles to ensure they accommodate the types of vehicles that are typical for these kind of facilities. And we also did evaluate, as I alluded earlier, we did take a look to provide a fire access lane to the rear of the building, and we did evaluate for turning capability of those vehicles. Something else we'll also clarify with the fire chief to his satisfaction. Customers will primarily enter the main entrance from the parking lots on the east side of the building, and that will provide a limited conflict between pedestrians and larger vehicles that may wish to use the loading areas on the west side of the building. At that west side of the building, we are the building provides a designated covered loading area with 2 spaces, and that's intended to accommodate larger storage activities. Regular vehicles can use those as well, but that's for the case of if someone has a medium-sized box truck that they may have larger storage items they want to get in and out of the building. This loading area is located and designed in a manner that was intended to minimize impact to adjacent properties, so we've limited the opening of that, and I'll allow the architect to speak more about that since it's a building issue, but we've isolated it so there's only one opening and it faces Route 22. Refuse, and there is an additional uncovered loading space delineated in the main parking area to the east of the building, and that is off of the main drive aisle on that.
But could you point to that
parking.
again?
Certainly. That's right over in this area here. So we have one uncovered loading space here, the 2 covered in the building here, and while I'm up, just to help better delineate, this is that main parking area on the east side of the building. And like I said, larger vehicles for these spaces can bypass and come to this end of the property. Refuse and recycling collection will occur on the east side of the building, where there's a proposed dumpster enclosure at that location. These collection services will be managed through a private hauler. We note that we would like to note that we are going to resolve a design waiver issue that was brought up in one of the review letters and reduce the height of the trash enclosure from 6 foot 8 inches to 6 feet maximum. Just wanted to point that out while I'm talking about the trash enclosure to see if we could minimize that non-compliance.
So sorry, can you give me that number again?
Yes, sir. It was, we're reducing the proposed height of the trash enclosure from 6 foot 8 inches to 6 foot even, which will comply with the ordinance. Maybe I stated that incorrectly. 6 foot 0 inches proposed.
Which complies.
6 foot complies. I apologize if that was
Your original
unclear.
was 6.5, now you're going to do the 6 foot, which,
Yes, we're going to reduce the height to comply. I'm sorry if that was unclear.
okay.
Regarding building height, the total height of the building will measure 26 feet above average grade as calculated. This is under the maximum permitted height of 35 feet, though we note that a variance is needed for the number of stories, which is identified in the plans. As the cellar is counted in the number of stories, we will have 3 stories, which is 2 floors above the cellar, where only 2 are permitted. In addition, just want to identify there is a portion of the building parapet that will exceed the permitted maximum of 3 feet for a parapet. That will not have an effect on the total building height complying. It's just a specific requirement of the parapet, and the architect will speak more in detail about that.
Before you go further,
Yes,
just
sir.
to be clear, from the street, the building appears 2 stories. The ordinance defines the cellar as, the cellar would be an additional story, which results in a
Yes.
sum of 3 stories, is that right?
Yes, and there's, I'm going to speak about that a little bit in a moment, too, so thank you for bringing
And
that.
that's because you're using the basement.
The basement will be
Storage?
partly, yes, there will be storage units in the basement as well as the main floor and the second floor. Because of the grade on the site, and I have an exhibit which will help demonstrate some of the grade change across this, which I'll be introducing shortly. We've partially buried the cellar and partially exposed it on the Route 22 side, where we're on the lower side of the site. The architect's elevation will help clarify that a little better than my explanation, but that's, we're taking advantage of the grade of the site in a sense, that we can kind of push the building into the hill a little bit and reduce the appearance of the exterior of the building. It'll actually make it look more like a 2-story building on most views of the site.
Mr. Winters? On the
Yes, sir.
parapet, could you clarify that? Because you gave some brief testimony. I don't know if you completed it. Roof is at 156?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
The roof is at 156 feet? And parapet's at 161 and a half?
Yes, there are elevations, and that was noted in Ms. Doyle's review letter as well.
Just so you know, we all use Ms. Doyle's report letter. I mean, that.
I do too. It
board
covers
functions.
anything that
So, you
I
know,
want to see
A
too.
word of advice, you should use it too.
Well, then that's the exact location that I can cite. And yes, there is a portion of that parapet which will be, as I view that, 5.5 feet in height, where a 3-foot parapet is the maximum. I'll let the architect speak specifically to where the parapet does exceed, but there are exceedances of the 3-foot.
So 3 feet is required, and you're going to exceed that at 5.5.
Correct.
Thank you.
I do want to note with that exceedance, it will still be less than the maximum building height permitted of 35 feet. We were at 26 feet. If I put the 5.5 on it, we're still under the 35, and it's just a point of clarification I wanted to make.
Still need a variance.
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It's a variance. It's just a slightly different variance, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear because it's as written. Perhaps since we were just talking about the grade, it would be a good opportunity to introduce another exhibit we had that just helps also demonstrate the grade across the site.
And once again, Mr. Winters, identify it by title, date, and mark it as A3.
Please put today's date again.
This exhibit, which is now Exhibit A3, is titled Chimney Rock Self-Storage Site Section. What we're depicting in this exhibit is, oh, excuse me, thank you. The date on the exhibit itself is November 3rd, 2023. So what we are depicting on this exhibit is the grading plan from our site plan set as submitted, as well as a line illustrating the section that's taken through the property below. And to demonstrate that, if I point here on the right side of our section view, this is where Route 22 is, which is on the bottom of the site plan view. And you can see the grade comes up. The existing grade is dashed, and the proposed grade is in solid. Now, at the particular location we've taken this, I do want to note, and that was, we selected this location for a couple of reasons, although at this location, we're not embedded into the hill quite as much as we are as you get further to the west of the site. As I noted, there's more.
When you say this location, could you
Yes, sir.
actually point to it, please? 'Cause you can get up, yeah, it's better.
I've been keeping myself pinned to the microphone so I'm heard, but
Steve, is there a wireless?
Is there
you
a
could-
wireless out there?
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes.
yeah. That wireless, by the way, works really well when you keep it very close.
really close, okay. I'll do my best. We've drawn this section A approximately through the middle of the site. And at this location, as I was saying, there's more grade change on this side of the site, and it reduces as you get here. And you could still see, though, that as you come across the site from front to back, this lighter dashed line at the bottom representing the existing grade where the existing office building sits today continues upward as you get up to Donahue Road. Our proposed grade at this point in the site, the building is sited a little bit higher. You see a bump here, which is our retaining wall at the back, and this retaining wall actually gets higher as you get back into this corner where the grade continues upward. The purpose for this really is to demonstrate, and I'll reference back to this again later, but just right now to show how we have this grade change. And this is a real scale 1-to-1 on this particular exhibit. So it's not enhanced or otherwise altered. It's a 1-to-1. Yes, so that's, as you can see, this is is this still working? Okay.
Yes.
At the very back of the section is the nearest residential structure, which we wanted to see how close we were, so we've just demonstrated that location. It's a little offline, but that's at the proper depth. So again, just to provide a little perspective on the development and the grade.
As you were describing the grade change, you said the grade changed from one point to another. And could you describe more thoroughly how the grade changes? Does it get higher in one direction, lower in another? All I heard so far was that it changes.
At this point, if we stand on Route 22, where we've drawn this section, we're at an elevation of around 122. Once we're up on the circulation road that runs in front of this building here, our driveway on the site, we're already at elevation 134, and that's actually very close to current condition. It might be give or take a foot from what the existing condition is. If you've been on this part of Route 22, you look up at this and you see a hill going up to the site because that existing building does sit up high. We're going to be sited similarly to that, at give or take a couple feet from that. It's varying from the existing building just because this building footprint's a little different and a little bigger than the existing, so we've adjusted the grade accordingly. And our proposed grade, that kind of stays even around that finished floor elevation of, we call a 135 finished floor elevation, which we're holding at the rear of the building. Again, that's not that far different from current grades. It's around that grade, about midpoint of the building. It's a little lower at this corner because we'll be cutting into the hill a little bit with development at that corner, which is the reason for the retaining wall. As we get back on the top side of the retaining wall at Donahue, at this point we're closer to elevation 138, and then grades continue upward at the point where we sited the residence It is in the approaching 155 to 160 elevation back up here. So that's just a quick walkthrough of the elevations as we go from Route 22 upward, northward, excuse me.
I have a question. You're going to be changing the existing space there's a current building, and looks like you're going to be expanding where the new building is going to go, correct? So you're going to be covering more land, correct?
There will be, yes, there will be more land covered with the new
So
application. And
my question is, will the existing detention basin be sufficient to handle more water runoff?
For that, we are actually proposing to do two things. We'll be keeping an existing basin here. We're going to be updating the outlet control structure, but we're also going to be adding an additional stormwater management system, which haven't gotten up to in my testimony yet. It's coming, but we could talk about that briefly. But yes, we're going to provide additional storage to ensure we meet the applicable requirements of the DEP for stormwater quantity control in this case.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions about this exhibit?
Mr. Kulak, did you get an answer to your question? Because I don't feel like you did.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
So maybe we can start at, what's the total slope? And you gave some brief testimony when you started. What's the change in slope from the northernmost point to pick a southern point on Route 22? We can start there.
okay.
I thought I heard 27%. I wrote that down. I can't.
No, I don't believe I gave Mr. Chairman, I don't believe I gave a slope. I've just been speaking about grade elevations.
Great, then you can talk about grade elevations.
So grade elevations,
Kulak's
okay.
question.
I was concerned I did give a slope, but no, we have a finished floor elevation of 135. That is not dissimilar from existing grades generally around that building.
And it changes from Route 22 to where the property abuts Donahue by about how many feet?
So down at Donahue, we are closer to elevation 130.
I'm really talking about where you were pointing earlier, where you drew the line down the middle of the building, and you
Right.
were measuring up.
For some reason, I went to that end of the site. Up here at Donahue, we were at 138.
And you started at how many?
122 at Route 22, 135 finished floor, 138 Donahue at this midpoint of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Although this section doesn't demonstrate it, but since we're talking about grades, when you get to this part of the site, at the far western extreme, Route 22 is going down grade, so it is closer to 117, 118. Our building elevation is the same, although we're going to be coming up this is the fire access, by the way.
Right.
That runs around the back. Where that starts, that's lower than the finished floor elevation because this is where that cellar elevation of the building is exposed more since we have the lower grade in front of the building. Actually, I have elevation for that floor of 124.5 down here. You could see these contour lines indicating we're coming up that grade along the side of the building until we get to closer to that 134, 135 grade. So if you stand here today, and in fact, having been at the site, this isn't very different than the driveway that's on this side of the site today, which you could actually make out in this exhibit. It's right in the same spot.
So there's a change in elevation of approximately 13 to 15 feet?
Along the side of the building, yes, we're going from, at Route 22, we're at about 118. At the very back corner, we're at 135.
Thank you.
Again, we're
Question on the drainage, once again.
Let me finish. So you testified early on that the steep slopes ordinance is in play. Can you tell us why that is, in fact, the condition of this property?
The steep slope ordinance is in effect for any properties where you have greater than 10% slope. Different factors apply to that effectively reduce certain bulk standards.
So going back to my question then, so if we're in play on the steep slopes ordinance, so what is this property, what is the change of slope from the northernmost point to Route 22? And Mr. Winters, the reason this is important and the reason we keep asking it and the board keeps questioning it, because literally a quarter mile to the west, someone died in 2019. They were swept away by water. So this is so important. And I'm not making any statement that your application isn't addressing these issues. But why does this board keep coming back to these points? Because someone died. So maybe you can try and answer my question again.
Okay. I just want to ensure I can best address the question in context of what we're proposing here and in what we have in the ordinance.
Mr. Winters, what's the slope? What's the change from the northernmost point to the southernmost point?
Well, in the context of the zoning ordinance, it's not specifically relevant to what the ordinance for hillside development says, as I understand it, unless I'm missing a point. And I don't mean to, I just want to ensure I'm at best addressing your question, sir. But the, I will calculate the slope to ensure I can give the correct answer right now. The average slope along our western property line is 7.8%. Average slope.
You just testified that 10% average slope brings the steep slopes ordinance, so that seems conflicting to me.
The applicability of the ordinance has to do with whether there's portions of the site that exceed the slope. Now, just because the average here, and I just gave the average because it's easiest to visualize from point to point, and it's in line with the description I've been giving. The applicability has to do with if you have areas that exceed 10%, and there are areas that exceed 10%, but they're isolated. We've actually prepared and submitted a steep slope exhibit that demonstrates these calculations. I don't believe I have a copy of it with me tonight.
Do I have a copy of that?
It was in the application package. I believe a copy was provided enough for everyone. The purpose of that exhibit is to allow us to calculate what is stipulated in the ordinance, which is what portions of the site exceed 10%, 20%, 30%. On those bases, reduced permitted impervious cover and reduced permitted floor area ratio are calculated. Now, that's the only context I had intended to speak about that ordinance tonight, because it has to do with the bulk standards.
So I have a grading plan, sheet 5 of 12.
There's a separate sheet 1 of 1 steep slope exhibit, which was in the original submission. I would,
Had I have that, being the diligent chairman that I am, I think I would have had the answer and not asked it. So why don't we either take a break and you can supply us that information, or at some point, something I'd like to see, and I think the board would benefit, as well as members of the public would benefit, to know the slope on this property. Sure. Yeah. And I hope the gravity of what I said, and I don't mean to be dramatic and I don't mean to play it up. Someone died. You know, and I think it changed how I view every single case, and I don't want to speak for any other board members because I'm only one vote. But it certainly changed every single way I look at every single application, from resident to commercial. And I hope you really take that into account when you give your testimony. Thank you. Please. The steep slopes ordinance, I think, is something that I'm very proud of, and I know Scarlett has worked really hard on it in this town, and I think it's a unique aspect of our town, and I think it's something that we absolutely need to have that document so the board knows how that's going to be functioning in relation to other aspects of this case.
And those areas of the steep slopes, that your statement, those areas of steep slopes looking at the plan are sort of in the northwest corner where the current sort of building and fire lane circulation area and retaining wall is being proposed, which is just about 6 feet in height at its maximum, I believe, just looking at the grades here. So in the corner of the site, in that corner
and that fire lane's gonna be using pervious materials, so where your steepest slopes are, you're using kind of, I don't wanna say experimental material, but you're using pervious pavers. I'm curious about the ability for those pervious pavers to properly pick up and move all this water. So I think it's another aspect of your application I hope that you'll focus on.
I'm going to switch back to A2 since I'm going to be talking more about some site items. Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, to that one concern you raised since we're talking about it, in addition to these pervious grass pavers in the back, we are providing a number of inlets along the back which are really intended to collect runoff that would be in that area. We were equally concerned that we wouldn't want a flat area at the bottom of a wall without adequate drainage, so we are providing a provision for that.
And since we're here on pervious pavers, I mean, I'm assuming that we're gonna put into the deed this maintenance requirement that was brought up in our planner's report?
Yes, we'd be happy to address that as a condition of any approval that may be granted, yes.
A2?
Yes, A2, the prior site plan rendering exhibit that we presented. So I briefly just wanted to talk about signage on this site. In particular, we have a proposed freestanding sign at the easterly entrance. That sign will measure 3 foot 6 inches in height and 5 foot width in total for a 17.5 square foot area of the sign. The area of the overall monument is a little larger as it measures 6 foot in width total and 5.7 feet in height. This sign will be externally illuminated. It will have the name of the facility, and we are also going to include the street number, which is a requirement that we want to ensure we address. That was brought up in the planner's letter. We are also going to make a modification to the plan as proposed. Per the planner's letter, we were deficient on our setback. We were at 23 feet for the sign instead of 25. We will happily increase that setback to comply and provide the 25 feet setback for that sign. So this plan is also good to point out, since I did want to talk about lighting and landscaping that is proposed with this project. We'll be providing lighting through a combination of pole-mounted and building-mounted LED fixtures. A total of 4 light poles are proposed mainly in the parking area on the east side, and we're using building-mounted fixtures to provide illumination around the front and sides of the building. The building-mounted fixtures, the pole-mounted fixtures will be mounted at 20 feet in height, and building-mounted fixtures, the mounting heights actually vary from as little as 8.5 feet to 26 feet. The reason for that having to do with the fact that the elevation, as you'll see in the elevation views the architect presents, the front elevation of the building where we have more exposure of the facade is taller than at the rear of the building. We will have the lower mounting heights along the west side and the north side of the building, and those higher mounting heights correspond to the front of the building. Fixtures are all dark sky compliant with zero uplight, and we've designed the site lighting to ensure there's no spillage onto adjacent properties. So the design will meet the township requirements for lighting. The site will also be landscaped with a variety of trees, shrubs, and grasses. This includes plantings based upon the township's planting standards. The majority of landscaping is provided on and along the site perimeter. As you can see in these areas, we have proposed landscaping along the sides and the rear, as long as along the front.
What's in the front? I'm sorry.
Landscaping. We have a variety of shrubs and other plantings. We have some trees.
No trees, though.
Parking area. We have some trees on the eastern part of the
In the
site.
front, that's going to maybe obstruct a 36-foot building.
A challenge we had with planting the front comes down to a, you still hear me on this? I'll talk on this one. We have a sanitary sewer easement that runs clear across the entire front of the property. There's a hatch you might see on here in white.
Uh-huh.
And that's a limiting factor that's affecting our ability to completely plant the front as might otherwise be done. As a result of that and some other limitations, we are seeking some relief from the requirements of the various landscaping requirements the town has. That includes, excuse me, that includes the street tree and front yard buffer requirements along Route 22, which again, the slope along the front and the sewer easement. If you go there today, you'll see it apparently was a limiting factor in the current conditions since it's all grass on that part of the property.
I see that one of your bulk variances says street trees, that you need 36, and you're proposing none.
That is correct.
Why?
I can't put street trees on this side, unfortunately, because it's DOT, but our easement encumbers the entire front of our property here up until you get to the parking area. We have a limited area here, which we felt was more appropriate to give our
limited
buffer planning.
Because of the design of the building, isn't it?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
It's limited because of the size of the building. So if you had a smaller building, you'd have a little more space to put in the required trees. I understand from a business perspective, bigger is better, but did you
No, that's a fair point.
consider the Bridgewater ordinances before you designed the site?
That may be a question that goes more towards the applicant as to the motivations for the site. I mean, I can say as their attorney, there are levers that get pulled for a site like this. You increase height, you can make a building a little bit shorter, you decrease height, which was our understanding in talking to some of the professionals, and certainly our motivation was to design this building in a way that was least impactful and most respectful to the residential homes on Donahue. So to lower the height to the degree we had to, which is 26 feet for the building, that consequentially meant to flatten the building out and make it wider, which ultimately resulted in the proposal that's before you. And that's ultimately the reason that the applicant...
Well, you're asking for at least 20 bulk variances, so it just...
Well, there's a number of them are design waivers, but yes, we understand that the application has a significant number of relief, and part of that, you'll hear from our planner tonight, deals with the odd shape of it, the slopes, and all of that factor into a site where if you were to comply with the ordinance, you'd have a building envelope that really couldn't fit anything, right? So you'll hear more about that from the planner, but to address what I thought was a question aimed at the applicant's motivation here, I just wanted to answer that, and that's the reason why. We designed it in a way to keep the height down to limit the impact, visual impact, and other impacts to the residential homes on Donahue.
So I'm going to go back to my original question. I'm not sure you answered it. You may have, but did anyone consider the Bridgewater ordinances before the design was completed?
The application was submitted understanding the relief that was needed. There's no question about that. A building of a smaller size, you probably wouldn't see an application. It just wouldn't work.
So you're saying that if you were to shrink the size of the building to eliminate some of these requested variances, it would not be profitable for the business and you couldn't go forward. Is that what you're saying?
Whether there's profitability, operational-wise, we have an operation guy here in terms of the market demands for a use like this. All of that factor into the size that's before you. Yes.
He answered it.
Thank you.
Can you clarify the height of the building? I see in the application, our paperwork here says 29 feet is the building height. You're saying it's 26 feet. Can you clarify what the correct height is?
Yes, it is 26 feet proposed.
I don't know if that was in the application. It certainly was in Ms. Doyle's letter, so I didn't know if that was an error from the application or from Ms. Doyle's letter, but it's 26 feet.
Thank you.
Will you be removing trees at the rear of the property?
Yes, there will be some trees removed at the rear of the property to facilitate the construction of the fire lane, the retaining wall. We will be providing a landscape buffer along the back. We are meeting some of the requirements for that.
You know how many trees you'll be removing? Because they are quite mature and would be difficult to replace with shrubs and saplings and things like that. So do you know how many trees you'll be removing?
By my count, and this also, I have 21 trees removed.
Those trees currently serve as a visual buffer between Donahue and the property which lies below. So if I'm on Donahue in one of the residences, I'm probably looking at trees rather than buildings. Is that fair to say?
Yes, there's a view of trees from the Donahue side. Those 21 trees are not in one particular spot. They're scattered along the back.
Yes.
The application removing 21, we are proposing 61, which includes a mixture of deciduous and evergreen trees. Most of the evergreens that we're proposing are along the back to provide an evergreen buffer in that area, which is most affected by those removals.
Okay, thank you.
How big would the evergreens be?
Initial planting height of those is in the 6 to 8 foot range. The plants we selected have a more rapid growth rate of a foot to 2 a year initially. So in the exhibit I had put up a moment ago, which I can bring back up A3. This is a good moment just to talk about that. What we are showing at the rear of this building, and this is an estimated 15-foot height at about 5 years of growth for this particular species.
Half the size of the building.
Not yet, but they are being planted at a higher elevation. They'll be at the top of the retaining wall. So at this point, they may only be, where we've drawn this, we're only a 3-foot high retaining wall. Where we have a 6-foot high retaining wall, these may be 15 feet at that point, but at this point, it's effectively 18. At this point, it's effectively 21 feet. So it's helping to absorb some of that visual from Donahue Road.
Thank you.
In light and consideration of the non-compliances we are looking at with some of the provisions of the landscape standards of the township, I do want to offer that subject to approval of the application. We're certainly willing to review this matter further with the planner and try to see opportunities and ways we can maximize the plantings on this property and try and be more compliant with those provisions. Having established that, I do want to turn back to talking about utilities and stormwater a little bit. And for that, I'm just going to put A2 back up because it's more useful for that.
We're back at A2.
A2. The A3 was just relevant to the landscape discussion, which we're going to talk about utilities for a moment. Our project will propose new utility services to this building, including electric, telecommunications, gas, water, and sanitary sewer. All services will be provided from the Donahue Road side of the property, which is consistent with how they're provided today. Overall, for these kind of facilities, there's typically reduced demands for water and sewer, which we've calculated, versus the office use that's existing. Our project is designed to address stormwater management as outlined in the stormwater report submitted with this application. On the basis that our project will disturb more than 1 acre, we qualify as a major development under the DEP stormwater management regulations. So for that reason, we've analyzed and evaluated the site to comply with those rules. There will be a decrease in parking lots, which is a benefit because that's typically associated with an improvement in water quality. We are exchanging parking lot for building on this application to the extent that we're actually going to be increasing the existing impervious cover with additional building. The total increase, in addition to maintaining our existing stormwater basin, which I mentioned earlier, which is on the east side of the site, in order to ensure we account for the additional runoff from those impervious surfaces, we'll be proposing a pervious pavement system in this parking area here. That's the green-colored part of the parking lot here, as opposed to the regular asphalt pavement sections. And that'll be sized to provide additional quantity control, attenuation of flows before they're discharged from the site. Our system is designed to meet the current DEP green infrastructure standards. That is an approved green infrastructure best management practice. So we can comply with the quantity control requirements, and all other requirements in our report are noted as addressed. We don't have any further obligation to meet the water quality by virtue of the reduction in vehicular pavement surfaces. The site will also include a storm sewer conveyance system throughout to collect water from the paved surfaces, also from the roof drains of the building, which will mostly be we'll maintain existing drainage patterns, and the majority of those are going in the direction of our existing and now our proposed detention system on the east side of the site. I do want to talk briefly about traffic generation for this.
Can I ask on the stormwater system?
Sorry, yes, if you have questions of stormwater.
So,
now's a good
yes, so what is the, your retention basin? What's the elevation of the retention basin?
The elevation of the existing or the proposed?
The proposed.
The proposed.
Yes, where your pipes discharge into your retention basin.
So the surface of this is in the 132.5 to 134.5 range. Then we have a layer of the pavers stone underneath that. And the discharge elevation for that is set to ensure that we have positive drainage to the detention system, the existing basin. So we'll be piping in this direction, so that way everything continues to drain towards the eastern part of the site.
Okay, and the eastern part of the site is more of the high point of the site?
Eastern part is, the grade on 22 is a little higher here, but compared to this part of the site, everything drains in this
All
direction.
right, so what's the, do you have the pipe invert elevation of discharging into the,
I may have a sheet with that on it, if you could bear with me one moment. The invert out of the underground detention portion of the pervious pavements is 129.0.
okay, and then if, on the west end of the site, where it exits onto US 22, what's the elevation there? The roadway elevation, your impervious surface?
The roadway elevation at Route 22 is about 118, 117.
Okay, so it's 10 feet lower than the retention basin.
As currently designed, a portion of the site in its existing condition.
Okay, so all that water on that side that's lower than the retention basin, where's all that water going?
Much of that water directly discharges towards Route 22 today. The DOT only permits stormwater to continue in the direction of flow. So for portions that currently drain in that direction towards that driveway, they're going to continue to do so in the proposed condition. We're not increasing that. We're maintaining existing drainage patterns.
A question? If it rains an inch an hour for 6 or 7 hours, will that detention basin be able to accommodate that without overflowing?
Our basins are designed with the standards to account for all storms up to the 100-year frequency, which is the 1% chance storm, which itself is a 24-hour duration storm with, right now our requirements are more than 8 inches over that time period. High-intensity storms are considered in water quality calculations, but what I can offer is the design does comply with the requirements in place, and since we're under the current stormwater rules, that includes the current iteration of the stormwater regulations in place, which are more restrictive than prior.
I'm not an engineer, so I'm not sure I understand. So if it rains an inch an hour for 6 or 7 hours, will that detention basin accommodate that?
If it falls within one of the approved storms, it can accommodate what's in the design.
You have an
The
expert.
simple answer is the standards for designing these, we comply with those. As I noted, a 100-year storm, there's more than 8 inches over a 24-hour period.
Hi, Adam. No, and I think Mr. Vesio also hit the nail on the head where the basin's at 129 feet elevation, and the westernmost point at which Route 22 lies is 118. And listen, I know that the state DEP has the requirements, and I understand that you're going to design something that meets those requirements and not anything more, because why do you have to? But at a certain point, it goes back to 2019, where we did lose multiple residents in a flood. I don't know. I think Mr. Vesio has a very valid question, about the 118 versus the 129. Your basin is above the lowest point at which the flooding did happen, a quarter mile to the west of this property. So, maybe you can answer both of our questions and Mr. Vesio's questions. And how is this site better than it was previously? And how do we protect residents in one of these storms that Mr. Bongiorno mentioned, where we do have 24 hours of inundative rain?
And thank you for that clarification. And it's a good question. It's a difficult question to answer on the design side, and which is why I'm pinned into saying we've designed it per the standards, because to just say is it designed for this is difficult to answer if it's not what the standard is. So I apologize if that's not as satisfactory of an answer as I'd like it to be. But what have we done differently from what's there today is a good question. I could start with that. One thing that's changed since the time that this site was originally constructed is all the stormwater management rules are in effect since 2004.
Hold the mic closer.
Thank you. All of the stormwater management rules that have gone into effect since 2004 have required more rigorous measures to account for stormwater runoff, water quality, and all these components. Where when this was originally designed, that might not have been the case. Regardless, we're obligated to ensure we're addressing reductions in quantity, which is why we have the need for additional storage. We're increasing the impervious cover on the site by 1/10 of an acre, but we're putting in, it might not look like much, but there's quite a bit of storage under here, including chambers that are storing runoff from this roof that is part of the system. The system has chambers as well as stone in it. the elevations may be a little confusing, and I can certainly understand why. In the existing condition, this part of the site is developed and it drains this way. The existing driveway, much like this proposed access, runs at a lower grade. It comes down quicker. And this little portion of the site on this side, in the existing condition, proposed condition, that discharges right to 22, and we're not increasing what's going to 22 as a result of this application. Everything going this way, we're going to deal with in accordance with the rules and the proper design standards for that, which is why we have the additional storage.
Mr. Winters, there's no pumps in this
No,
plan. So
no need.
basically, anything at 129 feet or above is going towards your basin, correct?
yes. Anything higher than that is going to the basin. It connects into systems on the eastern side, which are at a lower elevation than we're detaining the water, so that way it can get out. The exception here is that this pocket of the site, beyond this point, we're at elevations 134, 132, 130. From about here down is where we get to a point lower than that, and once we get beyond a high point, there's a portion of the site that does drain directly to 22. So that doesn't influence this system. This system continues to function to take the majority of the site in the direction. And again, we're matching drainage patterns because that's what's obligated to us. DOT in particular requires we match drainage patterns. So we have designed it in accordance with that. So to your point, we're improving the site by providing additional storage of stormwater in this part of the site. So we can hold back, attenuate those flows, meet the required reductions in peak rate of runoff, things that are required under the rules.
Paul, your comment just now in response to the chairman's question that pumps aren't necessary is because just that. Pumps would only be required if you're servicing the drainage at lower elevation on the west side, which you're not, because that's an existing condition.
Correct.
Unaffected by our proposed building.
Yes, that's a correct conclusion from that, so yes.
Just to add to that, Mr. Chairman, if I could, just to touch on the DOT coordination on this project, have you already filed with the DOT, and have they approved the drainage, the proposed drainage configuration and the drainage patterns that are being, put forward on the plan?
We're preparing I was just about to get to my traffic testimony, and what I was going to note was we're actually going to be preparing a letter of no interest based upon the trip generation and the fact that we're not altering driveways. We will comply with the stormwater provisions that DOT requires us on this. Obviously, if we change something, they will need to approve that.
Right, okay. And then, I guess, just to add to that, so just to confirm, the entire roof area will be managed by the new additions to the system. None of the roof area is discharging.
That is correct. So the majority
roads
of the
or-
impervious is all going to be managed through the basin on this side of the site. So we're capturing all that water. I'd like to proceed with the traffic unless we need to touch on anything else, of course.
Are there any more board questions on wastewater and drainage? Board professionals, are you good? Moving on? I just want to handle drainage right now, wastewater. I just want to make sure we're all satisfied because this is very important to everyone here, I know.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment that after a major rainstorm, maybe like once a year, there is actually debris that's brought down Donahue and actually Vossler to the east of this site. It's not a 5-year, 10-year reoccurrence. It's actually fairly, one year storm is pretty much the interval, but that is something. So, is the applicant aware of that condition in the site?
I'm not personally aware of that condition. It is possible to have higher intensities with those shorter duration storms, like a water quality event that may make that happen. A summer storm tends to move things more than you might expect them to. So that observation doesn't surprise me, but I wasn't specifically aware of that condition here.
All right, thanks.
So then, the retention basin doesn't factor in any runoff coming off the mountain? Is that what you're saying? It's only factoring in runoff from the site? I mean, it's a mountain there, we talked about the slope a little bit.
It's primarily our site. In our stormwater report that we submitted, we delineated contributory areas to the different parts of the site. I'm aware that there are some inlets along Donahue Road, existing condition, that pick up some of that Donahue Road. Anything that we delineated that was outside of that may actually be in our numbers if it contributes to our site, but
But you said earlier, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the rear of the building, you have drainage coming off the retaining wall.
we have proposed, yes, right in this part of the site here. In this part of the site underneath the fire access at the back, we have some inlets here. That's still on our site, that's still draining water from our site. And those connect into the detention system on this side of the site.
All right, and just so the members of the public know, all of this testimony you'll be able to ask questions on after he's complete. We just wanted to make sure that the board got all their questions about wastewater. But after he's finished, Mr. Winters is finished, any member of the public can ask questions on anything that he's testified on. So, thank you, Mr. Winters. If you want to move on to traffic.
My pleasure, sure thing. We evaluated the traffic generation of the existing office use versus our proposed storage facility. And we've calculated vehicle trips based upon the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual, current edition. We determined based upon that this development will result in a net reduction in peak period trips and total vehicle trips during the weekday daily, the AM peak hour, and PM peak hour. So in short, this type of use has a lesser demand than the office use and the amount of office proposed versus the proposed amount of the self-storage facility. The exception to that is during the Saturday daily and peak hour. There are minor increases since at that point on a weekend an office is less of a traffic generator than a self-storage facility where at that time people would be coming to this kind of facility. That said, the additional Saturday trips fall well below the threshold associated with what the Department of Transportation defines as a significant increase in traffic under the State Access Management Code. So overall, there's a net improvement during the weekdays and a slight increase on the weekends.
Mr. Winters, what hours is this going to be operating to generate this trip testimony that you're giving? So is it a 24-hour facility? Is it a 9 to 5 facility?
It is not a 24-hour, and I'm going to allow the operator to actually give some testimony on that because I
You
think.
have to give us what this data you just gave us was predicated.
Well, the data given here, regardless of the hours of operation, the ITE establishes peak flow.
What's ITE?
The Institute for Transportation Engineers.
Okay.
They establish criteria, rates related to different uses in different parts of the country. And with that information, we can estimate what would happen in the peak AM period, which is generally 7:30 to 9:30 is defined under the way they run these kind of traffic analyses, or the PM peak period, generally 4:30 to 6:30 range. The weekend, the Saturday peak is generally 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Now, that's
Mr.
not
Winters,
necessarily.
What are the hours of this facility? So the board can weigh this testimony that you just gave us. And if you don't know, you can say you don't know.
My understanding is we're open, but I'm going to allow the applicant's operator to speak about that.
You don't know?
Definitively, no. No.
The applicant here?
Before you do, just state your name for the record. Please identify yourself.
Yeah, hello. Matthew Lang, co-founder and CEO of Snapback Self-Storage. So as it relates to hours of access and operating hours, the site will be open for customer use from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. The office hours, which will be staffed by 1 to 2 employees, will be open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and on Saturdays from roughly 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., closed on Sunday for the office.
So you're not a 24-hour facility?
We're not no. And we typically, when we're coming into new locations, we match the market. In this market, the standard hours for access across every location in the area are 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
If someone stores things in your facility and they get a code key or an access code at 9:01 p.m., they will not be able to access this facility?
That's correct.
Thank you.
There are going to be gates that prevent people from driving in, or how does that work?
On this facility, there are no gates, but all exterior doors have keypads, and each customer has an individual code that they access.
The chairman just stated, so if someone comes in at after 9, the keypad won't allow them access?
That's correct.
Thank you.
If I may ask a question about your traffic testimony, you were saying that you use a standard, you kind of do the analysis and say this will be consistent with the standard based on the type of facility that it is. You had outlined earlier that there were 876 units and there were 19 parking spaces. And during the peak times, your belief is that 19 parking spaces are more than adequate. So I'm guessing that fewer than 10%, fewer than what, 5% of the people are there at the peak time trying to get to their storage units? Is that fair to say, or am I misquoting what you said?
No, we do believe that the proposed spaces, the 19 count, is adequate for customers and for staff
Well, I heard that part.
for this type of use.
Just to clarify the response, the standard that you use to calculate the peak traffic movements and the standard that you use to calculate the sufficiency of the parking spaces are both provided by the same institute.
In this instance, it is correct, because we relied upon the ITE for the parking requirement as well.
So as you would use that data, they would say that given that there are 876 units, you only need 19 spaces. Is that what you found to be true?
From our experience and from our review of the ITE, yes. The applicant may also be able to speak, operator may also be able to speak to his experience on facilities, as it's his business, with a little more background than that.
Right, so we'll get that testimony at a later time, indicating that they believe that the 19 spaces are adequate for 876 units.
Let me just jump in, because it's a question I'm saving for later, but because you brought it up. You did state, though, that there are loading areas, did you not, surrounding the building?
Yes, there are, and those, if I were to consider that as well, in addition to the 19 physical spaces we have a couple of loading areas, 2 on the west side of the site, and a striped load area in the front. So there is a little overflow room if we felt it was necessary, but that is there, so thank you for pointing that out.
So just because we're on it, I'll cover it now. So what's to prevent someone coming and using the front of the building or the Donahue Road side of the building? Can they park there and load?
Well, on the front side, we can discuss this, but right now I don't have any specific provision that prevents that, other than if it's enforced by the owner management of the building.
If I can clarify
There's,
the question,
Yep.
you're talking about on the circulation road?
That's right.
Parking in front of the building on the circulation, well,
Yeah.
those are not going to be marked spaces, correct?
they will not be spaces, that's for certain.
That's not a loading area.
It is not a loading area, and if anyone were to park there, they would have to move at some point when another vehicle comes through, so it's not intended as parking.
But there are exterior doors there to access the units?
The exterior doors are actually on the eastern face, and there is one door in that covered loading area on the west side. Those are the primary customer access points.
So somebody
So-
parking on that circulation road would have to,
It's an inconvenient spot for someone to park. They'd have to walk with whatever they're unloading or loading to that point, as opposed to coming through the main entrance and being right next to the parking spaces.
It's difficult for us to visualize how customers will use the site because all we see is a gray, whatever polygon that is, that fills the site almost completely compared to the footprint we had seen before, which is the existing structure. So we're trying to guess, because we don't know, where people walk into the thing, how they gain access to the various units, and are there any exterior doors that I can open, because we don't know.
We think alike, John, because one of my other questions is, are we going to get the elevations on the screen? Because obviously, we've got some black and white elevation images.
I was actually just going to suggest, it's skipping ahead in the testimony, but these questions align themselves to that exhibit.
Yeah,
We do have an exhibit that the architect is going to bring, which is a color elevation.
Fine.
a rendering.
we can wait, then, if you,
Wait for that, and we can address those.
fine. That's great, thank you. So just to clarify then again, so any loading areas are marked? There's no loading around the circular
But
part of the
the
building?
only permitted loading areas are the 2 spaces here, which are by an entry point to the building, which is at the cellar level of the building, because that's at the lower side of the building. And the two main entrance points here for customers, and that's where all the parking spaces are being proposed on that end of the building by the main entrance.
Perhaps, but, you know, my college kids, you know, comes home and she needs to put her stuff in the storage, and there's, you know, the 18, 19 spots are filled, you know, and there's 800. I mean, it seems like maybe it isn't that much. You go run it in, I'll wait in the car kind of thing. I mean, I'm assuming that's part of this business model, right? I mean, if somebody's there and they go there, they want to get their stuff.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that will be addressed by the operations, that while you have a unit count of that number, how frequently somebody accesses those units really is quite different than we imagine.
Just to answer your other point, and as far as the feasibility of someone doing that on Donahue Road, that's even less, and that's even more discouraging than parking along the front here. Not only are you physically separated from it, you're on the other side of what's going to be this dense landscape screen we're providing. So you can't walk directly in without cutting through all that. So that alone is a deterrent, besides the fact that it's a lot more convenient to come in here, and if someone wanted to get in, wait their turn if they suddenly couldn't get a space for some reason, though, again, we feel comfortable
So
with this count.
final question for me at least. So these are not fire lanes? It's not like going, you know, to whatever Walmart and there's a big fire lane around the building? Are these fire lanes or no?
They're currently not delineated as such, but we're not opposed to providing that kind of marking if that's something that's desired, or if the fire chief would want to see that here.
Thank you.
Basically, whatever the fire chief wants, the fire marshal is going to put into writing, yes. And so I'm punting the whole thing, deferring to him.
We're certainly happy to work with him. We want to ensure we address all his concerns as everyone else's concerns.
You said that all of the units are external doors?
No,
Oh?
the entry points, I pointed to the external entrances to the building. The actual storage units are interior to the building. I'm not aware of any exceptions to that. The architect and the next witnesses will be able to speak to that a little more specifically. I'm more focused on the exterior building.
And the stairs to go up to the second and third level, where are those staircases?
I'll let the architect speak to that again. It's all interior.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question on two spots you have for loading within the facility. What is the length of truck that can accommodate?
These are designed to accommodate, I'll give you the exact length in a moment. We spoke with the operator, and they will see some people like to use box trucks that don't exceed maybe 25 feet is what you see at their largest. They tend to be smaller than that and not in great frequency, but up to that. And that's a reason to provide that, besides the fact that we want to comply with the provision of loading spaces. The actual length, I'm going to verify on my plan. I'll tell you the length of those spaces.
Sure, and while you look at that, what would be like the maximum length truck an individual with a standard automobile license could rent?
Thank you. The two loading spaces on this end have the spaces are striped at 30 feet. There's a little room behind them, an additional 6 feet, but they can accommodate up to a 30-foot length truck. This loading space can accommodate up to a 50-foot length truck if they needed something that large, but that's, again, larger than what they typically see to accommodate at this kind of facility.
Right.
And there was a question in there.
Yes. What would be, so for an individual with a standard automobile license, what would be the longest truck someone could rent?
I unfortunately don't know the answer to that one. That's
Yes, exactly.
if someone has a commercial license or something.
Well, not commercial license, but just, standard residential, what length truck would that be? I guess would that loading dock accommodate the largest truck that an individual with a standard Class D license could rent?
I'm going to see if there's anything that the witness who's going to operate this can offer on that. My expectation is we are accommodating the size they need, because this is a building they've reviewed and are content with this provision, but I'll let them speak to whether there's any concern.
Sure, thank you.
And the answer, if we need to, yes.
Mr. Vesco, looks like the largest U-Haul is 26 feet.
Okay, thank you. My other question is on the parking spot. The ordinance generally, or we call for generally 9.5 feet by 18 feet. You're proposing 9 feet by 18 feet. I mean, for this type of facility, what are your thoughts on that for reducing kind of the size stall, considering the activities that someone is performing with their car?
Understanding that's the standard for the 9.5 in town, the 9 foot is in most instances, including several other jurisdictions, the standard, the 9 by 18. So it's not a compact space by any stretch, but understanding it's less than required. I noted earlier, one way that we're not concerned about that is because we're providing additional room at these front spaces. So if people have something larger they need to unload, and they need the side doors for, they have that option. I also feel since we do have more SUVs with the rear hatch, that's not as much of a limitation as it might have been with just a sedan loading. But at 9 feet width, we're not significantly narrow compared to a standard parking space. We're actually at a standard. It just happens to be, it's highlighted because it's a departure from the standard, and I just wanted to ensure that was noted. Yeah, it would, to comply with that would either require a reduction in parking spaces under the current footprint or some additional impervious cover to accommodate the extra half foot per space. That would, I have almost 7 more feet of width on that, on this side here. And that would be on the assumption that everyone that showed up at the same time would have to open their doors, which is not necessarily what would happen. Other than that, what do we have left? Just briefly wanted to touch on outside agency approvals that are or may be required for this application. We have already applied for and been granted approval from the Somerset County Planning Board. That was completed in July. And we have filed with the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District, and they also certified this. So these have been reviewed and found to be consistent with their standards, with any no comments or all comments addressed. We will be filing a letter of no interest application with the DOT as I noted, we're not producing any traffic that achieves the level that would need any other permits from the DOT, and we're not changing those driveways. Apart from that, I think we wanted to speak briefly about any other reviewer letters. We did talk about the fire review letter up front. We did also receive a letter from, I have a copy of the letter from the sewer utility, which we have reviewed the letter of November 3rd from Mr. Genova, and we can comply with all comments noted in that letter. No objections to Mr. Genova's comments. We've also had an opportunity to review both the planner's report dated October 30th and the engineer's report dated November 8th. We've spoken to some of those items in that letter through testimony. In general, we believe we can comply with, as a condition of approval, we can comply with their conditions to their satisfaction.
Just to reiterate, so anything that you didn't mention that was brought up in either the engineers or the planning report, you're going to comply with if you didn't mention it already specifically?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Comments that we're asking for testimony, we believe that we addressed them throughout the testimony.
Right.
Recommendations to the board applicant.
Well, the good news is they're sitting right there, so you get to, yes, good.
Is there a list of the things that your testimony is relevant to? Because we have numerous requests for variance or design relief and so on. We're trying to follow along here, but the scorecard gets confusing. So maybe, just as a suggestion, if we started with, we're asking for 22 different things to be relief from, and I'm going to provide testimony that'll cover 12 of them, and here they are, that would bring more clarity to the case that you're trying to present. Right now, I don't know what those are because honestly, I've lost track. I don't expect that the members of the public were following along. If they are, then maybe they can explain it to me when they get up. But right now, I'm not clear.
We can certainly do that, and I think Ms. Doyle's letter is a good place to do that.
Yes.
I think that would be helpful because, I've only been on this board, approaching a decade, and I've never seen this many variances requested in one case. Not a judgment, just a fact. Please.
Created at the wishes of the owner, and the engineer does the design, and the planner is expected to make it work. The planner is expected to say it's reasonable, but that's not the reason, the basis upon which a C variance should be given. Based upon reasonable is it narrowness, slopes, are there wetlands that would prevent a person, for example, the designer, to create a 9.5-foot wide stall. So don't leave it up, don't throw it onto the planner to try to save the day. The engineer should, through all of these, other than the fact that you've got a unique geometry of the site, we know that. I'd like very much for the engineer to say, it is not possible to provide the 50-foot conservation easement. It's not possible to design a lot coverage in accordance with the ordinance, irrespective of the fact that his client doesn't want him to. We're talking about the land. We're not talking about the owner. We're talking about the land, and that's what I'm afraid might be missing in his statement. So if he can talk about it in those terms, and if I could have the right to interrupt, that would be really helpful, so that the board knows.
You always have the right to interrupt, no matter what.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I only have about 8 items that I feel are not related to the conflicts of geometry. Maybe 10. So it's up to the chair how.
Listen, I think you always bring incredible intelligence to these cases, and I'm very, very grateful. But at some point, I agree with Mr. Kulak that the scorecard is confusing. It's even more confusing for members of the public that don't know the vernacular. So why don't we dig in? Why don't we first see if the board has any additional questions on overall testimony? I know we spent a lot of time working on wastewater. We talked about traffic. We talked about trip generation. At this time, before we go to our professionals, do any members of the board have any questions on the testimony? Mr. Fresco, why don't we clean it up here and then we'll send it to our
Yeah, a couple things. First, do you want to testify about well, let me start here. Let's talk about the retaining wall in the back. At the highest, how tall is the retaining wall in the rear?
We're approximately 6. I can get you the highest on
6,
my plan.
okay.
It's a little
And then,
bit
because,
6, I'll say that.
fine. What strikes me is, we've got a neighborhood here, we've got a lot of homes, kids, you're right on this road, kids could play. Is there a fence? Is there any protective, I just worry about a kid falling off this thing,
Yes.
skateboarding back there.
There will be a fence at the top of the wall. Our building in the fire lane is on the low side of the wall. It's higher at the top of the wall. And there's a fence that's required to ensure we provide fall protection. That's a code requirement, and we will have that. That fence is also going to be separated from Donahue by that landscape buffer, and
Right.
between that and Donahue Road as
What
well.
was the fence?
The fence is going to be 4 feet.
Okay. Can we pull up the image of the slope again? I want to talk about, I couldn't find it in my packet. I'm sure it's A3, thank you. Again, there's a neighborhood back there. You've got a giant flat roof. I'm trying to understand, again, I'm trying to get clarity on these sets of trees. So from right to left, we've got the building, we've got a small set of trees, and we've got some space, and then we've got some large trees. Can you just identify for us what is what?
There is, this is a rough representation. There are trees that are along this side of the road. They're outside the right-of-way. They're over here. I just wanted to account for them in this, just to understand what's there today. But there's a wooded area here. There's a house here that sits so far back, it didn't even make the exhibit. And there's wooded areas that fall in the front of some or most of these houses.
Yeah, I'm familiar with, I was there, but yes,
Yes.
yeah, okay. What are the bigger trees?
that's what-
Is that what you're saying? Those existing trees, those are the big trees there in your image? Yes, that.
These are the existing trees.
Those are existing, okay.
Yes.
So your trees are the little ones at, I realize at planting, that's what your trees are.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're showing 3 trees in a row, but, the guy in this house, when he looks out his window, he may or may not see those trees, but he potentially is looking at the roof of your structure, correct?
We provided an approximation of what a sight line we think would be from the house back here. And we are, from that elevation, you could see we're hitting that corner. And that's looking almost level across. We're at that corner of the building. Now, this height of the building isn't more than a couple feet higher. I think the existing is 22 feet, and we're 26 now. So there is an existing building of a similar height on the property. This is, of course, a bigger building, as we've noted. But yes, for that view out you're looking towards, you'll see you have some of the existing trees may block some of that. We were going to be planting trees along the back, which will help further block some of that view. Here we show the very top of the building visible until maybe, this is a 5-year projected growth, maybe 10 years. That starts to hide this a little bit more from that buffer for first couple of years. Yes.
The difference in height between the existing building, understanding it's more narrow than the proposal, but the existing building is about 4 feet.
That's correct.
And the view that those residences have now beyond that building is the same height.
Yes. Yeah, so if I continue to look down the hill, just like today, if your view is not blocked by a building today, you see Route 22.
Okay, great.
Arguably, this building will actually block more of the view of 22, but that's a preference of what you want to see from up here, but it's just stating a fact that this is a bigger building.
I understand. Okay, can you, and, listen, 21 trees removed is, something that, is a headline, frankly. So can you point out to us on here roughly where the 20, not all 21, but you can give us an idea of, because we've got a lot of families, a lot of neighbors here, and I darn well know if it was in my neighborhood, I want to know exactly what trees are coming down.
I can actually show you a sheet from our site plan set, which is worth showing. It's part of the record.
Okay, yep.
So as this is in the set, I assume we don't need an exhibit.
So
No.
right, that's what we have already?
Yes, this is sheet 3 of 12 of the preliminary and final site plan and use variance for Chimney Rock Self-Storage, revised through July 31st, 2023. We've identified trees that are going to be removed by putting an X through them. It's about 50-50. I would say about half of them are falling in this area because this is where we're going to be expanding the area the building is going. If you see this curve here, this curve, I can roughly transcribe here, that's close to where the retaining wall is going to go. So the trees in this area will be affected by that construction. The trees in this area will be in the fire lane when it's constructed. With the configuration of the additional parking on this side of the site, there's also some trees over here. These are smaller in contrast in some of these areas, but there's trees we're going to be taking down on this side. So it's not all in one spot. We've spread them out. But just to clarify, and this is where those trees would be removed, both that area and this area.
Thank you.
That addresses that question.
Okay, thank you. Just one last thing. So, and I think I can probably get this from the architect, but, so, again, the interest of those neighbors and those homes, are they going to be able to see people loading, or no? I don't think they are, because are you saying most of the loading is just east and southwest?
Yes, the loading, the identified loading spaces, the covered loading is going to be on the Route 22 side of the building. So that's totally hidden by the building from the Donahue side. If you're talking about that side of the building, there's the extra loading zone that'll be on the right side, which is actually on the Route 22 side of that parking lot. between the building and the landscape we're proposing, those don't fall in that view shed really from Donahue.
So, yeah, okay. So there's no loading on Donahue side, right?
Correct.
Okay, but there is loading from Route 22 side. I see it now. I don't think I actually saw it. We'll see it more with the elevation in the bottom right corner there. That is a loading. So you're loading on 22 side in two spots, the bottom left corner and the front right corner.
Just to help answer that question, as I shuffle the exhibits once more, I'm back to A.
Actually, you're loading there too. So you've got your loading bays. You got two loading bays on the left, and there's another.
Two loading bays, and there's an
You
opening.
can't tell me that there's people not going to park in front of that building. You're testifying that nobody's going to park in front of that building and load right there?
Well, it's certainly not intended for them to use the aisle in that way.
Oh, I'm sorry. So can you just put your hand to the bays, the two 30-foot bays, yep, and then just go to the right there, right next to that, to the right of that, that's not loading? Yeah, there, that's not loading?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There's no doors out here.
Oh, what is that?
That is,
Was it windows?
I believe there's windows in that, and
Okay.
I'll allow the architect to.
All right, fine,
talk.
fine. Okay, so there's no loading on the 22 side except for your two bays. Is that what you're saying?
The two bays are loading. There's that one delineated loading space right here. It's on this side of the parking.
Right.
North side of the circulation drive, south side of the.
Okay, so folks from Donahue will not see loading, folks on 22 will see some loading, and then, okay, great, that's all my question, thank you. That was all.
Any other board questions? All right, Scarlett, before we come. No, I was going to suggest a break, and why don't we call it 9 o'clock right now? We'll reconvene at 9:10. All right, thank you. Back in session here. Joanne, if we get a roll call, please.
Here.
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 Here. Here. Thank you. Sir?
Mr. Chairman. We've heard the board in terms of many of the comments and questions with respect to the quantity of the variances and some of the specific items that were referenced as important to the board. We want to be able to fully respond to those in a good way. We also identified a couple of areas in which we think we can improve the plan and reduce some of the variances. So my suggestion to the board, subject to the board's approval, would be to table going through that list of variances for us to be able to reduce that list and have those responses, while at the same time utilizing the time we have efficiently now, since some of the questions were addressed, were punted to the architect, we can have the architect present those exhibits so you can visualize, which is not going to change, the elevations and rendering of the building. Obviously, the engineer will still be subject to follow comment questions for the testimony we present, but I think that would be the most efficient use of our time.
I hesitate for one reason, and it has nothing to do with your case or your application or any of the specifics. But I know what it's like to sit in this audience and to sit here for 2.5 hours, and they have questions. They have questions on the testimony. And again, I do not mean this to be specific to your case, but I do think at a certain point, when you develop property, even a residential house putting on an addition, you owe the board and applicant a time to ask questions, but you also owe it to members of the public that have taken the time.
So will be subject to questions.
But it sounds like you don't want to do that now. Okay. Well, you just said you wanted to bring your architect up.
Oh, this evening, instead of continuing, we'll bring the engineer for this planning testimony. During tonight, that's what I want to do, but he can be subject to questions right now.
Okay,
I'm sorry if I missed it.
I think our planner has some questions, and I definitely think our members of the public have questions, and I don't want to skip them. I don't want to go right to the architect, because when you have gaps in testimony and gaps in time, things just kind of naturally fall to the wayside, and people have taken time out of their evening. They've been here. They, like us, we're volunteers. We skip soccer games and Girl Scout meetings, and we're here, and we want to be here. And in that regard, I think they want to ask questions. So I don't ever want to tell you how to put on your case, because it's your application. It's your right to do it any way you please. And if you want to skip to the architect, by all means, you can. But I think it would be best served to have our planner, Scarlett Doyle, ask her questions, have our engineer ask questions, and then members of the public ask their questions. And if there's still time remaining, because we're going to stop at 10 sharp, by all means, you can put your architect on or any other witness that you see
It was
fit.
a miscommunication. The intent of the statement was just that the specific list of variances and Ms. Doyle's point where she requested that the engineer, some of that is no longer be relevant.
Yeah, we don't need to do the scorecard and go through each variance. Yeah, well, yeah, I think the board was finished, and I think we had Ms. Doyle on deck, and if she's ready, I'm ready, and let's take it from there. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to make it so that all you have to do is say yes or no, and we can move it along. To the west of the site is a healthcare facility. That healthcare facility did attempt to address the conservation easement requirement that is found in 126.332. What that requires is a 50-foot buffer between the road of Donahue and any activities such as driveways. You didn't accommodate that in your design. Next door, larger lot, different geometry, they planted many, many trees on Donahue, and they also have a downslope before they reach the area where there is a driveway. Simple question, forgetting the client's desire, just based on your design, which created the variance, is it possible to provide a conservation easement of 50 feet on that lot, irrespective of the design that you have? Let me put it this way, is it impossible? You cannot provide a conservation easement.
We can provide a conservation easement. It's the width that I would need to confirm what we can provide. I know 50 is required.
Perfectly fine. So the answer is yes, irrespective of the fact that you're
Yes.
going to have to make some statements. Okay. The next thing is, our ordinance requires a maximum of 2 stories. Would it have been possible to provide a design that accommodated 2 stories from a structural, civil standpoint? Or would it have been impossible? It's pretty obvious.
To maintain the size of the building, not possible.
That's not what I'm saying. Now you're talking about your client, based
Okay.
upon the lot, in the middle of, just the lot. Is it possible to design a building that had 2 stories?
Yes.
Okay. The next one is, we're talking about lot coverage before and after steep slope. After the steep slope, you're 14% over what the lot coverage permits. Would it have been possible to provide a design that met the ordinance? Now, we're talking about narrowness, the steep slopes, wetlands, nearness. Let me just say, it is possible. Whether it meets your client's desires is another issue, but it is possible.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm tracking the rationale for C variances, by the way. Same for floor area ratio. You are in exceeding it. 0.25 is the max floor area ratio. You're at 0.87. Would it have been possible to provide a building that had a floor area ratio that conformed to the ordinance? It would have, correct?
Yes.
The next one, parking stall dimensions. We have been getting the 9.5 feet width. Is there any reason for narrowness of the lot, steep slope, wetlands, that would have caused you to make this impossible to provide a 9.5-foot wide stall?
For those listed conditions, no.
It would not have been impossible.
Correct.
Sign setback, you've already accommodated, correct? Maximum parapet height, you are over. Would that have been possible? That's an architectural.
Yes.
Architectural, and that's one of the ones we're going to revise.
You're going to, okay. The limits on lighting. The lighting, we have an ordinance that requires lighting, and you didn't comply with that. Not saying that you didn't comply with it, you didn't identify all of the parameters that we require. Would you be able to do that?
Yes.
Okay, the last thing is, I'm going through this really fast, just to demonstrate that the C variances are the preference of the business aspect rather than related to the lot. You mentioned that higher lights are on the Route 22 side. You are only, for the front yard of 22, you're only 56 feet off the highway. So if a person is driving down the highway in a westbound direction and they see these lights, how high are the lights that they're going to be seeing? In other words, is there going to be intrusion? Because you're supposed to be 200 feet off the road and you're only 56. So how high, what will the impact be? Number one, how high are the lights? And number two, what will the impact be visually so that the drivers don't see the source of the light?
The approximate height on those lights would be 35 to 40 feet above elevation of Route 22 in comparison, because we're about 10 feet higher there.
They'll be high. So will you assure that the light source will not be able to be seen from the traveling public, or would you have to evaluate that?
We would have to evaluate that to see if we can comply, and we'd be happy to look at that.
Bring that to the next meeting, that decision?
Yes.
It's very, very disruptive to have a light source staring you in the eye, because I'm sure you'll have several of them. And because you're so very close to the road, that could be a dangerous situation. Okay, Mr. Chairman, that is it. The most important things are the conservation easement and the C variance key variance aspects as to they could have done it, but it was a business decision.
Thank you, Scarlett, very
Thanks
much.
very much.
Adam, we have anything to add from engineering? Any questions?
Yes, I have a few
Great.
minor questions. Reviewing my notes and Mr. Burr's letter, there was one item, we had sort of talked about retaining walls and steep slopes, but just to speak to that, we will be cutting into that slope at the rear of the property along Donahue Road. And just sort of gauge the intensity of the earthwork that might be required. Do we know at this time, Mr. Winters, is the site balanced, in a balanced condition? Is there a requirement for bringing fill in, or is it going to be extensive cuts with rock removal required? I haven't reviewed the geotechnical report, but in regards to the depth of the bedrock, is there going to be a lot of rock removal needed to accommodate the cellar proposed and hauling off material or bringing material to construct the building as proposed?
We expect that there'll be a net export that is going to be cut on the site. Based on limited geotechnical information gathered for the stormwater report, we didn't identify rock to the elevations evaluated on the site. That's not to say there isn't any, but we haven't identified any.
We also spoke to the requirement for, and then the fire official had requested this as well, for providing the required truck circulation in the rear of the building. Obviously, there will be needed some revisions to the plans to demonstrate that is provided for that request. Is there also, will provide turning templates and diagrams for the site as well?
We could submit something to that effect.
Just speaking once more to the lighting, we have potential light impacts on the property frontage Route 22. Just also speak to the potential, not spillage, but let's say impacts to the residential property to the north on Donahue Road. I know the lighting along the fire circulation aisle is proposed at a lower elevation, I believe 8.5 feet above grade. Is there a specific need for that lighting? Is there a way of potentially minimizing or mitigating that lighting? Is there a functional reason for that lighting to be there?
That lighting is more for from a safety security perspective. We've actually discussed if we can look at a way to maybe make that a not on all the time or a select operation time lighting, and that's one thing we're going to look at. Lower intensity. It has a lower mounting height, and it's only intensity enough to provide a minimal amount of illumination on the back. It's not the same illumination level as a regular parking area. So it's already minimized. We may see if we could further reduce the impact at that side of the building.
Lots of questions to your
All right, thank you. Yes, Scarlett.
There's one thing that Mr. Alla brought up, and that is the fence. There's another variance that's necessary. A fence, that the retaining wall is 6 feet high, and that meets the code. It's not set back, it's not bent, it's just 6 feet. And on top of that is a 4-foot, I assume that's an architecturally attractive fence, a black wrought iron fence, not a chain link, right?
I believe it's a black vinyl chain link fence, if I'm not mistaken.
I would recommend that it be like the wrought iron, but it's aluminum, the black fence. Because the reason is, you've got residences there, we shouldn't give them chain link. The variance that's required is that you've got a 6-foot fence plus a 4-foot safety fence. So you've got a 10-foot height, rather than the max of 6, which is just a simple variance that you're going to have to ask for.
So when we do the scorecard at the next meeting, we're going to add that on.
Mr. Winter, did you want to clarify dimensions on the Exhibit A3?
Yes, there was a point when I was speaking about viewing from the Donahue side on Exhibit A3 that I failed to mention, that I just wanted to clarify since we have it with us tonight, A3 exhibit, once again. And it had to do with the view from the uphill side. And I had mentioned the fact that our building height was only a little taller than the existing building. But what I neglected to mention, and we show a sight line going to the building because that's probably the board's primary question, can I see the building? I want to bring the board's attention to the fact that this sight line, which is roughly level with your standing point here, maybe just a little bit higher, maybe a foot or two higher, is this corner of the building from my eye back here. Everything above that, above horizon, I'm looking beyond the building. So this building isn't even in the view looking in upward direction from that point. And that was a point I just wanted to bring up, which is not dissimilar from the current condition where you may see the existing building, but you can also see above and beyond it. So we're not blocking out light or anything with this building, not just because of the distance, but because it's only that high relative to the viewer's eye. So I just wanted to call attention to that point on this exhibit, that we have that benefit on this side here.
Thank you.
That was
Since that was directed to my question, if I may, because you brought it up, I actually thought about it during the break as well. But let's talk about the folks on the other side of the highway. I think Scarlett brings up a great point about the lighting on 22, but also what's their view going to be? That would be, I guess, their backyards.
From Glenn, right?
From the, that 35 feet lighting that's above the roadway, what is that going to equate to in those folks' backyards? So.
we could look at that. My recollection is that beyond 22, you have rear yards. There's some trees and such along the back of those properties, rear yards, and those houses front. I think it's Glen Road. Correct me if I'm wrong. On that side, and I believe they're also at a lower elevation. So as this slope comes down, it continues somewhat in that direction. But I would have to look into that and see how that compares to provide a more clear answer.
Based on what you're testifying to. So
Thank you.
As you were making a comparison to the existing building, saying that if I'm on Donahue or if I'm in one of the houses on Donahue, looking over the building, essentially, it's not necessarily something that impedes my ability to see beyond it, so I may or may not notice it. Does that capture what you said pretty well?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the mass of the proposed structure, if you were to compare it to the existing structure, is twice as big, 3 times as big? How many times as big?
I will say more.
All that gray shaded area on your
Yeah,
diagram.
no, it's clearly more than twice than big if I were to just look at it. I don't have the exact number, but
It's okay, it's close enough. So what we're saying is that
fair point, sir. Yeah.
even though we're looking out over it, we have a much bigger mass, and although we can't look around it to the extent we can currently.
That's correct. We can
Thank you.
still see above.
All right. If you're finished, I'd like to open this up to members of the public. And before we have a mad rush for the microphone, I just want everyone to know that this is called a quasi-judicial proceeding. And what that means in fancy language is, anything that you say, any questions you ask, could be heard by a judge. We have a court reporter here the applicant has kindly provided. And just, be aware that when you come forward, ask questions only on the testimony that you've heard. At the end of this case, you will have more than enough time to speak for or against this case. But at this time, the microphone, you just come up, give us your name and address, and just ask questions about any of the testimony from Mr. Winters. We heard from the CEO as well briefly. But this is your time to ask questions, to clarify, and let's open it up.
Why don't we do Ms. Westlake first?
Sure, we can do that. You don't have to raise your hand, you just, whoever's ready, come on up.
Good evening. Thank you so much for accommodating. I have a number of questions and clarifications. You indicated that the height of the wall along Donahue, the retaining wall, first of all, is the retaining wall the entire length of the property, or is it a portion of the property?
It is a portion, and it is not right along the property line. It is set back from the property line, but it runs from, I'd say about less than a third, maybe about a quarter of the run of the rear property line.
Okay, and that retaining wall is what, 6 feet tall?
A maximum of 6. It gets to be a lower height. By the time we're down here, we taper all the way down to a half a foot where it ends. So it declines as the grade of this road and the grade of the site changes.
And so if you're driving along Donahue and you're looking out your passenger side window, can you see the wall?
No, no, because we're on the high side of the wall.
Okay,
You will see buffered landscaping. You may see the fence at the top of the wall. If you could see it through the landscaping, you will not see the wall from there.
okay, and the fence will only be on the retaining wall portion of the
Yes,
property?
it'll only be along the portion of the retaining wall that's along that side, yes.
Okay, so will there be any kind of guide rail or traffic accident protection as somebody's driving down that hill that would stop them from skidding over and down the slope?
Given its location, we're not immediately next to the road. We're
Okay.
through the landscaping. We're more than 20 feet separate. I could look into it, but I'm not aware of a requirement to have guide rail for this particular case. There are cases that would require it, but I don't believe this one is one that would need it.
Okay, all right. You indicated that you tested the permeability of a portion of the property, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell me how many borings that you did on the property?
Yes, I can. We did. Hold on. We performed a number of borings to meet the stormwater requirements for the area we were evaluating for basin. 4 was all that was required in the area we evaluated, which was generally in this area of the site.
Okay. You didn't perform any other borings anywhere else on the site?
For infiltration, no. And honestly, that was, the bulk of our geotechnical was related to stormwater, so it was for this portion of the site.
So there was no need to determine the permeability of the rest of the site?
No.
Okay, now with respect to the circulation road that, for the fire access, I just want to understand, it's the green section that's made up of pavers, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you've indicated that you're going to comply with the fire marshal's request to change it from
Yes.
18 feet to 22 feet.
Yes, we will increase this to be a minimum 22 feet around the back of the building. The corners already were about 22 to accommodate the turning movement. And we have evaluated this, and to the board engineer's comment, we can submit a truck turning analysis, which we have looked at a fire truck, and we modeled the a truck equivalent to the 100-foot ladder truck that Finder and Fire Company uses. That can get access through the parking lot around the rear of the building.
Okay, and by increasing the width of the road, even though it's pavers, I believe that still constitutes impervious. Is there a change in the impervious surface that would result?
That area was accounted for in our numbers for the impervious. There's some debate on whether it should be or not. We were conservative and accounted for it as impervious. So yes, we would increase the impervious. That might require some additional storage in these basins, and if that's the case, we'll provide that.
Okay, so you would have to revisit your stormwater calculations and,
We may, depending on how the numbers work. Yeah.
okay. With respect to the highway access, are you currently able to, or do you meet current highway access code requirements for the ingress and egress points off of Route 22?
Yes, yes, the site is existing, and these are the access points, and we're not proposing to change those for the development.
If you were to revisit it and comply with current highway access code and Bridgewater Township ordinance requirements, would you be able to accommodate using those existing access points?
I would need to review those standards, but my understanding and my experience is that with these driveways as proposed, we don't need to further evaluate those.
No, I understand you don't for purposes of getting a letter of no interest from NJDOT. I guess my question is related to whether or not you've evaluated the safety of those access and ingress. Perhaps it would be beneficial to get a sense of what is the slope to get into the property from the eastern entrance, and then what is the slope for the western entrance?
board likes, I could take that measurement, or we could simply evaluate it separately.
We were going to get a slope map, right? That was kind of a,
Yeah, I believe it's in the neighborhood of 10%, so it might be,
you were saying that you had a slope map already generated, it just wasn't distributed? Just remind you and want to make sure the board gets benefit of that. And thank you very much.
thank you. Greatly appreciate that. I guess my question then would be, would you be able to revisit the current highway access codes requirements and the municipal ordinance requirements in order to satisfy current code requirements for ingress and egress onto the highway?
Before you answer, I'm just trying to clarify, because I think the witness testified that it does meet current codes in your last question.
I think he indicated that because you're not making any changes, there's no need to go to the DOT. But I'm asking if would sound design merit looking at revisiting the current accesses, because I think it's probably a pretty steep entrance, particularly on the western end. And when you combine that very steep entrance with effectively a U-turn, and if you're driving a box truck,
Trucks are only going to be permitted access from this side. This is the primary truck access.
okay, so
And
that,
this is a maximum slope of 5% coming in, so we're not concerned about the slope on the
okay,
driveway.
okay,
On this side, we actually have a no truck sign on this side because we don't want to encourage truck access. And not only that, but it's not convenient for getting to these loading zones.
right,
Convenient truck access. This is the first access point for the site, so this really is the primary point. I would expect the majority of all traffic will be through this entrance. This entrance will stay because it was there today and there's no reason to remove it. Our main egress, of course, is here. So to your point, I believe we are satisfactory with the egress, with the entrance side, with slopes.
mhm,
And just because I'm always cognizant of the transcript, it's not going to know where you're pointing to.
Oh, I'm sorry. At the easterly driveway, the one-way egress in has a 5% maximum slope in its existing condition, which will remain.
And that's the access on the eastern side.
Correct.
no worries. Are there any restrictions on the size of the truck that will be permitted to access the site?
No restrictions.
So if a 18-wheeler came in because somebody was moving and didn't have anywhere to store their things, they could come onto the site? And can you demonstrate how that would be able to access the site safely and make turns?
That's not a vehicle that's intended to access this site. It's not who this is marketed for, I think is a way to put that.
Right,
If your question is how do I stop a truck, well, truck will go where he can and not go where he can't is a
no, understood, I'm
simple
just,
answer I can give. It's not a technical answer, but
yeah,
they're not intended to be served by this facility. I would, to entertain the question, envision they would probably come in here and come through this entrance, this
but
wide driveway to get through.
would it be able to access those two loading docks there?
We have a 50-foot loading space here that if a vehicle of that large were to use this facility for any reason, they have this outdoor space. We've evaluated it for the types of vehicles that the applicant knows they're going to.
No, I hear what you're saying, makes sense.
Look at that, but we're not catering to those size trucks with this.
Right. So if you were driving like a regular U-Haul truck, which I believe the storage portion of it is 26 feet, I'm not sure that includes the cab, I believe.
Those can fit on the western side where we have the two loading bays on the southwest corner of the building.
Okay, and so how would they get into the bay? Do you anticipate they would drive in face first or to back in? And I guess
we expect they'll back in.
maybe that would be the subject of a truck turning radius analysis to see whether they could accommodate
They can
backing in
and we can show that in an exhibit, yes.
They've stipulated that they're going to provide that.
Okay, all right, thank you. One of the things you indicated was that the proposed sign was actually 2 feet within the setback, and you've agreed to move it to the 25 feet.
Yes, that's the freestanding sign near the easterly driveway.
Right. Does that sign in any way impact or block the sight line of the conflict in traffic? Because I see that if you were to enter in the westernmost entry and drive across or along the front of the building, and it looks like there's a stop bar there, and there would be a car coming in, let's say simultaneously, on the easternmost end, isn't the sight line blocked by the location of the sign?
No, there's adequate sight distance from that point.
From the sign in the newly located?
There will be a vehicle at this point in the driveway, based on your description, which is just before it enters into that intersection where you have the parking entrance and the driveway, all by this easterly ingress to the site. Once the vehicle is here, they have full view of the vehicle that has a stop bar on this side.
Once the car's gotten to that point, but they might not see the car as they're coming in?
There's distance here, but if they were to pull into the site and they come around this bend, they are on a straight section before they are through this point on the site.
How long is that straight section?
About 2 car lengths.
2 car lengths, okay. So based on the steep slope analysis that you did, and I guess I had the benefit of having seen it, you will in fact be grading within the areas that are 30% slope or more?
Portions of the site that are that steep will be redeveloped and graded through this, yes.
Okay. Now, from a general perspective, if you were designing this site from scratch, would you design a new runoff draining to a road without developing a new intervening catch basin?
That answer depends on what their infrastructure there is to connect to, the jurisdiction of the agency we're connecting to. It's a hypothetical that can't hang an answer on, really.
If you were to revisit the highway code, again, to perhaps take into consideration current design standards, particularly for the westernmost access, never mind, I'm sorry. I'm not an engineer, clearly. And I think probably just one last question. If you were to develop this site within ordinance requirements, would you have to remove any trees?
Yes, yeah, there would still be tree removals to some extent.
To some extent, can you give us an idea of approximately where?
An accurate idea, no, but I don't think there's, given the location of existing trees, I expect there would at least be a couple that could be. I mean, it's a very hypothetical, but I don't think it would absolve us from being able to preserve every tree on site.
And then, okay, to the point made by the planner, if you were to comply with the ordinance requirements relating to bulk variances, obviously the use variance issue is a non-issue, can you design a facility that can comply with the vast majority of the bulk requirements?
No, because if we were to comply with every requirement, we've estimated, and it is actually provided on this exhibit. There's a very tiny area here that, because of the various setbacks, Route 22 has a 200-foot setback. Donahue has a 75-foot setback, as we have from the side. There's effectively no permissible building envelope, so that alone is, the plan will
Understood.
talk about the rationale for it
Sure.
in better detail than I can, but it's a unique site. And
Right, no, it's, no question about it, it's
so
unique.
The simple
Now,
answer is no.
if you were to comply with everything except the front yard setback of 70 feet, of 200 feet, and say, do what's pretty much across the board in town, 75 feet, give or take, would you have a viable building envelope?
Even in that case, given the geometry of the site, and again, we're in a hypothetical planning consideration, I would be inclined to say no. It's a very limited, even with more generous front setbacks, the side and the rear are very limited.
But the existing site exists, right? I mean, there is a building there that works.
That building doesn't comply with current zoning either.
Not with current, no, I understand that. It could be repurposed, of course. Up to him if he wants to answer it. I suppose it's rhetorical.
So the question was rhetorical?
Well, I am trying to determine whether or not you can reasonably develop this particular piece of property within the vast majority of the bulk
Good
requirements.
question, though. I was curious.
And I think,
Could you repurpose this building?
I wouldn't put repurpose in the redevelopment, because that's almost like saying we have a new tenant, and
You can just say hypothetical. I'm okay with that answer.
and anything I would call a redevelopment and application, we would be before the board with redevelopment. We know the setback limitations and the other limitations. I'd still be inclined to say no. There'd still be a number of compliance issues for anything.
Thank you.
do you think there would be 22 compliance issues?
Potentially.
Really? All right.
I can say that safely, potentially.
No, appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Whistler.
Thank you.
Members of the public. Just your name and address, and then dig into your questions.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Savell. I live on Glen Road. Could you put the first picture back on?
And would you just spell your last name for us, please?
Savell, S-E-V-E-L-L.
So we're putting A1?
No, the first, on the back of that one,
A1.
number one. Yeah. My property is on the westbound corner, right in the back of yes, right there. You talked about the water running off and everything, and you said it was just going to dump onto Route 22. But right at the end of your driveway, on your other picture, there's a sewer on that one side. This is what the sewer looks like. It crosses under 22 and dumps into our property.
Val, if we're going to use a photo, I'm going to mark it into evidence, okay?
Excuse me?
I need to see the photo, and
Okay.
we're going to mark it, and we can show it to him, okay? I figured, yes.
The creek that runs on is totally washed out. So every time it rains, we get more water from the existing building, and you're doubling the square footage of the roof and non-permeable property, that we're going to get even more water. No one's coming our property to assess the creek or anybody or anything like that. And we've lost a couple of trees. It's getting worse and worse. Here's a picture of the sewer on the Route 22 side.
And you took these pictures, sir?
Wait, go back to what I just marked as O1, that first photograph, what was that a photo of?
That was the sewer on Route 22 side that crosses under 22 to the Vossler
When you say Route 22 side, you mean on Route 22?
westbound side, and it crosses under 22 to the eastbound side and dumps on the Glen Road side. And basically dumps into our backyards. Now, with the way it's set up now, we're inundated with water every time it rains. And if you're doubling this and tripling it, and he said from the middle over, it's going to go into the basin. from the middle to the left is going to be dumping on 22, and that water ends up on our property. As you see the sewer,
Give you this one back. I've marked, this photograph is '02, and can you just tell us what that's a picture?
as you see the sewer, this is the eastbound side of 22 where it dumps into our property.
So that's the outlet?
Yes, yes. And there's 3 sewers on the westbound side that jump on our property. And
Yeah.
here's another picture, standing in.
I'm assuming you're getting to a question with all these photographs,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Are they going to do anything with the sewer system that's existing there? Or the westbound corner of the property is 15 feet higher than the eastbound side. So if you're going to put 15 feet higher with another 20-foot light on there, that's 30-something feet of light. And how many light posts are you going to put along that property?
Wait, so before you get to the light bulbs, the sewer structure.
Yeah, will they do anything with the sewer system and clean the creek out, or put a pipe in, or do anything?
I can speak to the stormwater first, and before we talk about the downstream, I just want to reiterate what the development will do with stormwater as a result of what we're proposing. Yes, there's going to be a lot more building on the site, but there's going to be a lot less parking on the site. There's going to be 1/10 of an acre more of total pavement on the site when we're done with it, and to comply with the rules for development, we're going to have to reduce the peak rate of how quickly water runs off for certain storm events. That's the design standards we have to go with. So we're going to capture more water than we capture today. In today's condition, most of this ends up down here, and I should describe that better. The majority of the developed part of the site, the building, the parking lot, the rear, the parking lot to the right, are conveyed into the existing detention basin on the east side of the site. A smaller portion of the western part of the site.
That's going to 22.
Today, that directly goes to Route 22 in this direction to the west, down our west.
Exactly, and west is where the sewer is.
We are not going to increase the rate of what's running off today because we're not allowed to. We cannot increase what's running off of this and comply. So in part of Mr. Sewell's question was about the size of the building and the roof. Yes. Yes, and in terms of the size of the building and the rooftop, the building will be entirely collected and run, directed into the underground system and the above ground system at this side of the site and connect into the downstream drainage systems on that part of 22. So, and I wanted to start there just to be very clear that, yes, we know we're developing it and we're making changes, but we're obligated to not increase these rates. And it's the rates that drive conveyance and how much what's downstream can handle. To that point, like I said, we're not going to increase what's going out this driveway. And we're going to reduce to whatever amount is required the current rates going out the other direction. Beyond that, there's nothing proposed to address anything with the current creek situation.
Yeah, because we haven't heard anything.
We're acknowledged about. We weren't aware of that condition.
We have a high water table in this area. I'm assuming that they're going to do a perk test before they do this retention spot.
When
If it rains, that's going to fill up quickly.
It's interesting because at least on this part of the site, and understanding this, we're higher than your side of the road. That's obvious. You look up at our site. When we performed some tests here to determine infiltration rates and the such, we went to depths at which we did not encounter groundwater in this part of the site. That doesn't mean you're not going to have that in different areas, but thus far from our evaluation, we haven't run into that condition. It may be, now that's also 20 feet higher than as you go down, so I'm just calling that point out. So with that information, that's what we know.
Because one end of your property to the other property is more than 20 feet, so all that water is going that way, right to that source system.
From the rest of Route 22, you're saying that would make sense because that's the direction 22 moves in. So ultimately, all that water is going that direction. We still are obligated to, and we comply with our design by reducing the rate of runoff. So we are reducing how quickly the water is coming off the site. That's why we have detention basins to reduce those rates.
Oh, I have also a question with the lighting. How many light posts are you going to put along the front of that building?
The light posts, and just because it is the proposed condition on Exhibit A2 that I'm flipping over, the light poles are only right now proposed in this part of the parking area. We may, as discussed, we're going to look at the lighting along the frontage. We may revisit that in case the light poles may give us less or improved conditions along this side, but right now these are building-mounted lights along here.
So you're proposing a dark building. You're not going to put any illuminating lights along the
No,
building?
there's lights proposed here mainly to illuminate the drive aisle on this side of on the south side of the building along that driveway. But the mounted light poles, the 20-foot poles, are in the eastern side of the building in that parking lot.
No, because most of the people here live in that row of houses right there. So if that's going to be lit up 24/7, then that's going to be in our backyards.
As to the hours, we can speak more about the hours. I'm going to let that come out. I think the next.
Do they ever propose on putting a wall up on the other side of 22? On the Glen Road side?
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Along the shoulder of
Yeah.
22, a wall. Had not considered that. No. I mean, that's state right of way there.
Mr. Melnick, maybe we could get,
I have another question for the board.
just if I can interject here very quickly. In other cases, we've seen applicants kind of give a current condition of lighting and then a proposed condition of lighting. So, residents can get a feel for where the light posts are. And, it doesn't have to be down to the candle watts or whatever, the luminance, but, I think it would help the neighbors maybe understand what the current conditions are and versus what the proposed conditions are going to be. Please. Thank you.
Most storage units, you pull up to the garages, you unload and load it at your individual spaces. And the way it's proposed here, that everybody's going to meet in the parking lot at that one spot. So you're going to have 800 people at that one spot. My question is, has anybody from the board or town went to one of his other locations and just watched how many people come in and out of this parking lot all day and night?
You can't ask us questions, but if you'd like to know, I went to 2 others today, but I'm not presenting an application.
Will anybody do that?
Why don't you reframe the question to the applicant and ask them?
And I think they may be able to better indicate frequency and operation as far as when people are there.
Do you have a number of how many people come in and out on a given day, and weekend, Saturday and Sunday?
Information right now, no.
From a design perspective, you base the number of spaces again.
ITE.
Yes, we base the number of spaces on the use. The Institute for Transportation Engineers identifies parking demand for different uses, and the parking demand associated with a use of this size, 19. I think it is now. The Institute for Transportation Engineers Guide provides documentation, analysis on the number and the demand for parking spaces for different uses, and that was the basis for our calculation of 19 being appropriate for this kind of use.
Just my main concern is just the water, because we're getting flooded in our backyards every time it rains, and I just feel that you're doubling the square footage of the area. We're going to get a lot more water. Hopefully you guys look into that more, that's all.
You'll have an opportunity to come up and make statements at the end.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
I got them.
All right, we're going to do one more resident. It's 10 o'clock. We typically stop, but we do have a full house here. So please, sir, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Oh, okay. My name is Stan James Bukowski, B as in boy, U, C as in Charles, Z as in zebra, Kowski. I'm on Glen Road, dead center on the building. And for years, we've had this property since 1963. I grew up on that property in Glen Road when it was a cow pasture. back in the 50s. So I know this area very, very well. And I'm telling you, we get nothing but water coming from about the fourth
Sorry,
house in.
I'm going to just call you Mr. B for my own sake, okay? But would you have to just ask questions right now, not me.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
promise at the end of this case, you can speak as long as you want for or against.
Okay,
Application.
I got you. Okay, question would be on the traffic, on parking. You said the main traffic is be coming in from the east side, coming down, and then backing into this 2 spaces that's allocated here in the front of the building. My concern is what the woman said earlier was, she said, where's somebody going to turn around? Where's it with respect? Are they going to drive around the fire lane? What if there's a fire? Are people going to be parking elsewhere? Parking, I just can't see 19 spaces, and I don't see anything required.
Question, where are they going to park?
I'm sorry?
What's your question?
My question is, I don't see anything for ADA-related parking or anything like that.
Okay.
Is everything ramped?
We do have an ADA parking space. Based on this number of spaces, we're required to provide one, and we're going to provide that on the eastern side of the building, all the way on the right of the parking that is head in at the building.
Okay, and with respect to the parking space, you said there were 9 by 18, I think you said earlier, but 9 by 18. Now, a lot of people are going there, opening doors, hitting into other cars. You're going to have issues with people. I just think the spaces should be wider.
Our planner agrees with you, and they've answered the question, so, but they're also going to come back and make some changes, so maybe when we hear the next hearing, there will be changes on the 9 versus 9.5 feet.
Okay, great. Now, also with respect to the building I know is very large for the zone it's in, and because you're asking for relief from the board for the use. I'm concerned about noise. People coming in, contractors come in at 6 to 9 a.m. Some people work evenings, some people work afternoons.
Is that your question to him? What are they doing for noise control?
Yes.
Okay.
Like buffer, like I see you have the shrubbery straight across. Sometimes when you stagger shrubbery, you can get more of a deadening sound barrier.
And we do propose the staggered shrubs at the rear. We do have the landscaping, which I expect we're going to look for ways to increase that landscaping even more.
Do you have any of that on the front of the building that would help him?
Thus far, we've, as testified, we've provided landscaping in areas that are not encumbered by this sewer easement.
Well, I have a 4-bedroom house, and the 2 main bedrooms with the bathrooms to the back of the house face dead center of that building, and I know the lights, and that's going to be a noise problem for me.
Mr. B, maybe a question, could you provide more vegetative buffer in the front of the building?
Yes, that's my, or a wall.
I like Mr. B, all right.
We would be happy to look into seeing if we could do more vegetation at the front. If we can find ways to do that, we'll look into that. Yes, that's our restriction. I mean, we're restricted by what we can and can't do in the easement, so we're going to.
Okay.
If we can provide more, we will.
On the side.
Along the whole frontage of the site, there's this sanitary sewer main and
Can you
easement.
provide us with a copy of the sewer easement, please?
The other thing we can do, and whether this is some comfort you want to know, obviously the applicant has to comply with all state rules.
Okay. Decibel ratings or everything. Okay, and my other last question would be the benchmark, where the elevation of the interior floor. What's the relationship from the benchmark elevation at the mean ground level, where the building is going, to, you said it's 8 foot, 26 feet? How is that relating to what's there now? I know the building there now is a little larger, taller, so it would be shorter than that building there?
The proposed building is calculated to be 4 feet taller than the existing building. We calculated a 22-foot height above average grade existing building. We're going to be 26 feet.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Hang on, I'm getting a clarification.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And Mr. B, if you have more questions, we're going to have another meeting. Feel free to come
Great.
back.
Thank you very much.
All right, good night. All right, we're going to call it 10 o'clock here.
I think I would, our architect's already been sworn, and I think he can clarify that a little better than I can on the height.
Okay.
Yeah, just to,
And who are you?
sorry, Robert Nocella, S&S
Thank you.
Architects and Engineers. Just to clarify, so the existing building height, the top of parapet is measured to grade point 158, sorry, 157.75. our new building, the parapet, the main parapet of the building measures at 158. So essentially, the buildings are the same height, grade-wise.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Melnick, it's past 10 o'clock. We've gone a few minutes past, which I typically hate to do, but you've been good sports tonight. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 28th, after Thanksgiving.
I think we should go through what we've got here so that you're aware. And then you make your decision. On the 28th, I'd like to go through the next 2 months.
This is a busy board for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, yeah.
We have, on the 28th, we have Somerville Lumber and this CX Tower. The CX Tower is a telecommunications tower, a new one, next to, near Wegmans. So that's going to be a fairly long one. So that's the 28th of November. In December, we have 1200 Route 22, that's a large warehouse. And then we have Belly. Now, Belly is a townhouse, a dense townhouse development off of Mount Prospect Road in Findurn. It's extremely dense.
Scarlett, just to back up one.
Yep.
The warehouse, the 1200 Route 22, is a case that we're required by law to hear because the applicant has filed suit. And why don't you give us a very brief background so the board understands that this is not necessarily a new warehouse application, but this is a application that's been forced upon us by virtue of the warehouse ordinance our township council has passed.
More importantly, we're maxed out on the time. We have 120 days in which we have to schedule it. That's the date. We've got to at least schedule it and get approval to carry it, but it has to be scheduled for the 12th.
Gotcha, okay.
So then we have reorg in January. I mean, that's it, unless
And we have signature for that evening schedule, correct?
signature is going to be in January. Yeah. And in January, we don't have, as you know, we don't have any dates other than the first reorg meeting.
Right.
So all these will be carried to that reorg meeting and then given their dates.
All right, great.
This board is extremely slammed.
Thank you, Scarlett. So for members of the public, our next meeting is November 28th. That's going to be Somerville Lumber. That's going to be continuation. And the CX Tower, time permitting. Mr. Melnick, based on what you've heard, when do you anticipate you'd like to come back and see the board?
The 28th wouldn't work anyway to get the resubmissions.
Right.
So
Right.
nothing there. I mean, to the extent the board has only one meeting in December is what I hear.
Yep.
Carry to that date, understanding that it may not occur.
Right.
Either that or we could go to the reorg meeting on January 1st and then you can get your date then. Because it's very unlikely you're going to be heard on the 12th.
No, that's incorrect. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Scarlett, our reorg is not January 1st. Our reorg is January.
Did I see the first?
Yeah. January 9th. Yeah.
So I would like to carry it to the 12th with the understanding that it may have to be carried again, just to protect in case things do happen and things fall off that agenda.
I do want to make sure that members of the public are not blindsided. It's the holidays. I want to make sure they have plenty of notice. Scarlett, what's the best way to proceed, making sure that we have maximum notice to members of the public and people are aware of this case and the date?
What we could do is make the announcement tonight. It's on YouTube and it's here.
Mhm.
And it would be for December 12th. No further notice would be required. It would be here, recognizing that we have 2 other applications before it.
Okay, so to formalize that, this case will be continued to 7 PM. Our December meeting, December 12th, do I have that correct?
December 12th.
December 12th. We anticipate that case most likely will be carried on that evening, but nonetheless, 7 PM, this room, December 12th.
And there'll be no further notices from the applicant to the public.
No, thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chairman?
Good catch. Yeah.
And on the record, you agree to do that, the January meeting, what did we say is the 9th?
At reorg is the 9th, yeah.
We don't,
I always like a little more
Doesn't
room in the
exist.
winter, just in case.
don't have any dates.
Those meetings don't exist.
Yeah, but you could give us till January 31st. Yeah, okay,
Expiration to January 31st.
yeah.
Okay. So our next meeting for zoning board members will be here November 28th, Somerville Lumber CX Tower. This case will be continued to December 12th, 7 PM, this room with no further notice. And with that said, if there's no other board business, I'd seek a motion to adjourn, please. All right, then Mr. Widley and Mr. Bongiorno. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the applicant.
He is right.
Sorry, Jim.
Saturday,
I always like to squeeze in members of the public as much as possible.
And
I'm sorry.
and then there'll be no